Faites l'appel, s'il vous plaît, Madame le greffier.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Hélier. Madame le connétable de Saint-Laurent. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Brelard.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de la Trinité.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Madame le connétable de Saint-Martin.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Jean. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Clément.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Greville.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Ouen.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Sauveur.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Southern. Madame le député Labbé.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Tadier. Monsieur le député Luce.
Présent.
Madame le député Dublay. Monsieur le député Morel.
Présent.
Madame le député de Hegera. Monsieur le député Ayer.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Ward.
Présent.
Madame le député Alves. Madame le député Gardner. Monsieur le député Gorst.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Farnham.
Présent.
Madame le député Moore.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Mezek.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Osef. Monsieur le député Balash.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Coles.
Présent.
Madame le député Poré. Monsieur le député... Monsieur le député Ward. Madame le député Miles.
Présente.
Madame le député Scott.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Renouf.
Présent.
Madame le député Curtis. Madame le député Feltham.
Présente.
Madame le député Binet. Madame le député Jeune. Madame le député Miller.
Présente.
Madame le député Howell.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Binet.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Ferry.
Présent.
Madame le député Kovac.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Curtis. Madame le député Ward.
Présent.
Madame le député Wilson.
Présente.
Madame le député Stevenson.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Andrews.
Monsieur le doyen.
Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les ciels et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi le gouvernement et la puissance de la terre, pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir les cœurs et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, de la conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit, que toute leur délibération est accompagnée de ta bénédiction. Réussisse au bien-être et au soulagement du peuple, qu'il te plut de commettre à leurs soins. Car nous t'en prions au nom et par le mérite de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné à t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne. Ta volonté soit faite sur la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien. Et nous pardonnons nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous envoie pas en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car à toi est le règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen.
Madame le connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Excusez.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Jean.
Sir, the Constable of St John is attending the funeral of a close family relative in the UK.
Excusez. Excusez.
Monsieur le député Southern.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Tadier.
Présent.
Madame le député Dublay.
Défaut.
Madame le député Alves.
Défaut.
Monsieur le député Joseph.
Therefore,
Madame le député Jeune.
therefore, les États sont constitués.
So, may I ask a question about an amendment that's coming up? So, because it may be really clear, and if not, it will just speed the process up later.
Well, we're mid-debate. I wonder if it's the best thing to do is to finish the matter that we're
Okay,
doing at
yeah,
the
of
moment.
course. Yeah, sorry, I forgot that. So.
And then we will come back on the rest, Deputy. But yes, by all means. Deputy Hegarad, did you have a point to make at this stage?
Yes, sir. I've spoken to as many people as I could see this morning prior to us sitting, and I'd like to propose that we finish at 8 o'clock this evening. I'm aware that there will be one or two members that may not be able to attend for various other commitments, and that we finish at 5:30 for half an hour in order that both members can have a break and the staff working within the Assembly. So that is my proposition, sir.
Proposition then is we stop at 5:30 for half an hour and then resume concluding at 8 p.m. Is that seconded? Any member wish to speak?
So I think we're making good progress, and if we were to stay until 6 o'clock this evening, it would give members an opportunity to have a great session. Today we only have 9 amendments remaining, and then the consequent summing up speeches afterwards. And so I really think if members focus their energy on being succinct and getting through the business, I'm sure we can do it with a 6 o'clock finish this evening.
That's presumably on the assumption, Chief Minister, that we will continue tomorrow as is presently scheduled in the Assembly, because of course there are consequential laws to be passed following the government plan and indeed the traditional Christmas greetings. So, so I'm looking at the Connotables and Helier and I think Deputy Southern on this occasion. So, yes. So, does anyone else wish to speak on the proposition? The proposition that we pause at 5:30 and then resume at 6 until 8. Deputy Miller.
So do we really need a 30-minute break at 5:30? Could we have 15 minutes and finish slightly earlier?
I think we have to vote on this proposition. No, it's fine. It's a legitimate question. It may cause people to vote against it and then other propositions to come. But does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? In which case I close that debate. Do you have anything that you wish to respond on that, Deputy Hagra?
So we did discuss whether those members that I was able to speak to, we did discuss about not having a break at all and also a shortened break. But the thing was that by the time you've actually risen and then actually got out of the room, it's 30 minutes made more sense. In relation to what the Chief Minister said, so we did discuss it, and yes, we have been made good progress, but I think it's probably prudent to see if things change this afternoon, sir, then I'm happy to maybe look to reduce that. But I think at this stage, I would propose that we still stay with what I've proposed and that we go for the appel, please.
Very well. That is called for. Invite members to return to their seats, and the vote is on stopping at 5:30 for half an hour and then resuming at 6 to finish at 8 o'clock. And I ask the greffier to open the voting. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. That proposition is adopted. 31 votes pour, 9 votes contre, 1 abstention. Very well. The Assembly, therefore, will break at 5:30 this evening, resume at 6, and then we'll work through till 8, unless a proposition is brought subsequently in the course of the day to vary those times in the light of the progress we make. Very well. We now resume the debate on Deputy Bezek's amendment, 7th Amendment, extension of marginal relief. Does any member wish to speak? Any other member wish to speak? Deputy Miller.
Thank you, sir. I hadn't been, those famous words, I hadn't been intending to speak, but I've been giving this quite a lot of thought overnight. Deputy Balash mentioned yesterday that the 20% tax rate has been a feature of Jersey's tax law for decades, and that is certainly the case. as has Jersey's reputation for certainty and stability. And that reputation cannot be underestimated. It is absolutely vital to our economy that we are seen as a certain and stable jurisdiction. And every time we have this debate, it creates a little chink in that reputation. Is Jersey really the certain and stable place it once was? Can we be sure that if we bring people here on the basis that they'll pay 20% tax, before we know it, they're going to be paying much more? I've been involved in recruiting, bringing people to Jersey since the late 90s, and the 20% tax rate is it's one of the real draws to Jersey. If you're paying 40% tax in the UK, as was pointed out by Deputy Coles, I think, very many people are paying that level of tax. The 20% tax rate is one of the things that really brings people here, as well as our quality of life, our beaches, the myth that you can knock off work earlier than you would do in the city and go to the beach. Not totally true, because they're still working till 8 or 9 o'clock at night, a lot of these people that come over here. But it is really valuable for people coming here. And it's not just about individuals coming here, it's about businesses coming here. People choose to put business in Jersey for a reason, and the stability of our tax system is one of them. We are competing globally, and not just in financial services. For all sorts of areas, we are in competition with other parts of the world. So it's not just about where would people go. And I do have to emphasise that it's not just about people with money are not just people who have come to the island. There are lots of people in Jersey who have earned money, who are from Jersey, who are born and bred, and who have worked hard and have got themselves into a position where they would be paying the 25% tax under this proposition. Where might people go, or where might they leave Jersey to go to? Where may they not come to Jersey and instead? We're competing with the likes of Dubai, Luxembourg, Singapore, all our competitors in financial services, but we're also GPs. We're competing with Australia, New Zealand, the UK. The UK is competing for GPs and doctors. And every time we change this, our system, it makes us less attractive. How is that as a proposition for someone who's interviewing a GP? Well, when you come here, you won't pay 40% tax, you'll pay 25%. But just so you know, the vast majority of your patients won't be paying any tax at all. And most of your colleagues in here who are not doctors won't be paying any tax at all. That itself is not necessarily a comfortable message. A lot of people won't think, yes, that's a great idea, I'll come and pay 25%, when lots of people don't pay any tax at all. We have the idea as well, I think, there are some misplaced ideas that both individuals, people who come here and their businesses, they come to Jersey to pillage and plunder and exploit. That's not the case. Many people come here and they develop businesses and they put tens of millions of pounds every year into our economy. Their businesses are paying lawyers and accountants and financial services firms to administer their businesses. They're recruiting, they're employing local people, and not just in low-value jobs, not just as cleaners, but they're recruiting managers and secretaries and administrators and people who have skills, who are earning good money, and who are being given careers in those businesses. Perhaps personally, they may be employing cleaners and gardeners and nannies and housekeepers and interior designers. And, most of us aren't doing that, but it is supporting all of those local businesses in the island. And we have to be very careful about dissuading people to come here and generate money. How does it encourage people to get on and work hard? The point of the marginal rate is that it stops the cliff edge. So let's say someone is just below the tax threshold, and suddenly they get a pay rise of a couple of £1,000, and suddenly they've gone from paying no tax to paying 25% on everything. How does that encourage people to develop businesses, to develop their careers, to work hard? And generally, there's just an overall question of fairness. Now, my view of fairness and the view of fairness in other members are clearly two different things. But even if you went, I strongly suspect if you went to the pensioner group in Jersey and said, do you think it's fair that a pensioner couple can earn north of £230,000 between them, or have income of £230,000 between them and not pay any tax? Do you think that's fair? Do you think pensioners would think that's fair? That other pensioners can earn that amount of money and not pay tax?
So I do have a point of order. The Minister, I think, is not speaking to the amendment because she's bringing in arguments which are not... No, because...
Yes, I am.
Well, I think, Matt, it's obviously
So I
there's a
think-
fair amount. Thank you, Deputy. There's a fair amount of if you could sit down, please, thank you. There's a fair amount of leeway that I've been allowing up to now in the speeches people give, and I didn't see that this was straying off the topic at all. So, in my view, no, that's not. It's not a point of order that I'm.
So could I ask a point of order then? The ruling I wish you to make is to clarify exactly what the proposition asks. And can you clarify that the proposition is to...
No, Deputy.
So it's important that we know what we're debating.
Well, I would rather hope every member knows what they're debating, because I rather hope they've read the proposition, read the report, and I'm not prepared to further refine it beyond that. Sorry.
So can I? It is an important principle. If we were debating buses and we were proposing to reduce buses by 50p, and members started making arguments about free buses, that wouldn't be in order because that's not addressing the proposition. Similarly, the Minister's comments are not addressing the proposition.
Well, the matter of relevance, I note your desire that I will uphold and keep people strictly to relevance within speeches, and that may well truncate a certain amount of the things we hear in the Assembly today. But the reality of it is people are entitled to talk to an extent around the subject. I mean, no personal criticism, but you yourself from time to time talk around the subject with the point of view of making your point. And if provided it eventually zones in on the point and it can be seen to have a line that takes you there, then I can't say that it is completely irrelevant.
I'll put my light on now to speak, sir, just whilst you're looking at me. Thank you.
Very well. I shall write it down.
If the Deputy would give way for a point of clarification.
Deputy Miller, will you give way for a point of
Well, I've
clarification?
been completely disturbed now, sir, so yes.
I'll be gentle, sir. Could the Minister, the Deputy said that...
I'm so sorry. I'm assuming you simply wanted to speak next.
No, sir. I just wanted to raise the defo on Deputy Joseph.
Well, let's wait until, I beg your pardon, this is getting a little out of hand. Perhaps people could exercise some judgment when they put their light on in the Assembly. If they wish to speak, then wait till I nod, turn it off. If there is seriously a point that needs to be made now, well then, by all means, put the light on. But if someone is speaking, and the point can very easily wait until they've stopped speaking, then it would be helpful not to turn the light on, because it could be a point of order that you're making, and I'd have to then move from one speaker to you. So, if you make that application when Deputy Farnham has asked for his point of clarification. Yes, Deputy Farnham.
Thank you, sir. Would the Deputy clarify what she meant when she said that she alluded to the fact, unless I misheard, that islanders earning under £230,000 wouldn't pay tax? Yeah. I think she might have meant they would perhaps pay less tax. Could she just clarify that, please?
That is a valid point of clarification, if you would make that point.
Sir, I'm happy to clarify. My understanding of the graphs that accompanied this proposition, and perhaps I have misread them, in which case I apologise, but I understood that what Deputy Mezek said yesterday was that a pensioner couple could earn £253,000 of it. They would have £253,000 of income before they paid any tax. Well, clearly I've misunderstood that then, so I apologise. But the intention of the graphs were, I've understood, that many people were not going to pay tax. So if I've misunderstood that, that's fine. And I apologise. But I do believe, sir, I was speaking to relevance. I was answering questions posed by Deputy Coles. As he asked a question, where would they go? I was addressing that question. And I do find it somewhat ironic to be challenged by Deputy Taddy on relevance. So clearly I've misunderstood everything, so I'll end here.
Did you have an application to make, Deputy?
Thank you, sir. Can I raise the defo on Deputy Joseph, please?
Defo is raised on Deputy Joseph. Yes. Does any other member wish to speak? Chief Minister.
Apologies, sir. I'd like to raise the deaf on Deputy Doublé.
Deputy Doublé. Yes, for Deputy Doublé, Deputy Hughes, that's raised. Deputy Taglier.
Thanks, sir. So the reason I made the point of order is that I know as well as anyone that the chair is often generous in allowing latitude in speeches that don't always address the point, or they do it in a roundabout way. But the presumption is that a member, especially a minister, should have read the proposition and understand the fundamentals of what is being asked. So, of course, you can bring in tangential arguments, you can bring in as many straw men, and you can even bring in straw women these days if you want to make your arguments. But at least understand what the basics of the proposition are. So the fundamentals of this are, first of all, if you don't pay any tax at the moment, you won't be paying any tax in the future, any income tax, that is. If you're a marginal rate payer, that is, if you pay 26% marginal rate at the moment, you will pay 25% marginal rate, and you'll still have your allowances. If you're a 20% taxpayer at the moment, you will no longer pay 20% income tax. Instead, you will pay 25% income tax, but you will get the same allowances that everybody else has. Therefore, it's the extension of marginal rate, which is what it says on the tin, or in this case, what it says on the proposition. So the beauty of this is that you don't even have to read the proposition. And I won't be holier than thou and say that I read everything that comes into the Assembly, but at least make sure I've got a grasp of what it's about. So read the title, please. And so it's simply not factual to say that there will be a 25% tax cliff edge, because everybody at the moment who is paying no tax is still going to have their allowances. So it's simply not true to say if you earn an extra £1 and it takes you into the barrier of being a taxpayer, guess what? You'll only pay 25% on that £1, which is how much? It's 25 pence. So you probably won't even get a request from Treasury. I don't think they're quite yet that officious to send you a tax request for 25 pence, although I remain to be proven wrong. So first of all, have we all established the facts about what this proposition is about? Yes, I think we have. Now the next question is, do we like it? Or do we lark it? And some people don't like it. The first thing to do is just understand what it's about. The second point to say, and I don't want to misquote, is it the Tony Benn phrase? I don't know if it's been mentioned already, but it goes something like this. At first they think you're mad, and then they think you're dangerous, then there's a silence, and then after a while there's no one who can disagree with you. Because we're in a stage at the moment where, first of all, there's a misunderstanding. I think we've moved past the misunderstanding. We know it's been to the Assembly enough times that we should know what this policy is about. It's very simple. And we're starting to get privately members, even in government, saying, actually, this proposition is quite good. We quite like it. In fact, we don't even know if it goes far enough. Why didn't you put a 26% tax rate in for everyone? And then the private conversations will go something like this. Well, you know, we want to try and reduce tax a little bit for those in the middle, because we know that middle earners are feeling the pinch, sir. But if you want to bring an amendment to make everyone pay 26% tax, then be our guest. And outside the Assembly, we hear former ministers saying to us, former ministers, I won't name them, I don't want to embarrass them, but saying to us, actually, this is a really good policy coming forward from Reform Jersey. And I'm not a Reform Jersey supporter, but it makes entire sense. And they even say, and we were looking to do that when I was in government. So it can't be that bad an idea. So if we peel the Reform label off it, I'm not precious about the Reform Jersey label on it. Any member can choose to support this and make it their own policy. And mark my words, I think that in the next 5 to 10 years, a government will be doing this because it makes sense. And when we trot out these old Walkerite expressions about Jersey stability, sir, what we're actually saying is that we've got a situation in Jersey where there are public demonstrations virtually every week now, where our schools can't even have teachers guaranteed to be in them, and that's in normal times, let alone in strike times, because there isn't the full supplement of teachers that we need, where if you come to Jersey, you can expect to have to stay home to look after your children, because the government, after a whole year, can't negotiate a decent pay settlement with its own public sector staff in this particular area. So this is the stability that this government is bringing to the island. And to say that actually people come to the island because of the 20% tax rate. Actually, I spoke to a teacher last night, and she was telling me that about the troubles they're having recruiting staff over here, and said it's not like previously where they could just get staff to drop what they were doing and come over to Jersey because it was so lucrative. And she did specifically mention the tax rate, and she said what they do is they look at the tax rate and think, oh, that's great. But then what schools have to do to make sure that they're not bringing people over under false pretenses, they actually provide a little booklet to say, by the way, when you come to Jersey, this is what you can expect to have at the end of the month in your pay packet, once you take into account your social security, of course, your stealth living, your long-term care tax, your charge, which you may not end up claiming if you don't end up living in Jersey anyway, but it's a stealth tax. So But fundamentally, Jersey is built on the 21.5% tax, isn't it? The stability of the 21.5% tax, which includes the long-term care tax, because it is a tax. It's not a charge. So government has already tweaked and tampered with the 20% tax rate. When was the 20% tax rate introduced? Does anyone know? I'll leave it perhaps to another member to say that, but I don't know. It was probably introduced under interesting circumstances, and it's remained here. Incidentally, does anyone know when duty was introduced? It was introduced originally back in the days of the pirates and privateers, or a bit later than that actually. But around that time there was an interest in building a college in Jersey, and I think this is relevant, sir, because this talks about how taxation and public services are intrinsically linked. So there was an idea to build a college in Jersey, and it was a college which would ultimately become Victoria College. So the government of the day introduced an AMPO duty, and when they had the AMPO duty, the school never came until about 100 or 200 years later. But they already had the AMPO duty, so that came in. And of course, around that, you get the whole history of smugglers and privateers. But of course, we know today that people don't come to the island just to be smugglers or privateers. It's much more sophisticated than that, although we do still see Russian money in the island that needs to be frozen. And at the beginning of this debate, I had to check, are we debating...
Sorry, is this a point of clarification or point of order?
Yes, and I'm just questioning the relevance of why we're now talking about AMPOs and Russians, why we're now commenting on AMPO and Russians.
Me too, sir.
Well, I think it might be helpful if matters of relevance were left to presiding officers. Otherwise, it simply becomes an excuse to interrupt people's speeches, and that's not, as we know, a good thing, whether whoever does it, unless it's absolutely necessary. Deputy, I do think it is a slightly struggle for me to understand the relevance of AMPOs and privateers to the nature of the proposition currently before the Assembly. But if you're prepared to explain it in a sentence, that would be very helpful.
So the frustrating thing is I did actually explain before I even said it why I was saying it, because it is relevant. First of all, there was an allusion in Deputy Miller's speech to, I think it was pillaging, and saying that there's this idea that people come to the island to simply plunder and pillage. Those were two words that I think she definitely used. And I'm saying that historically there were people in the island who did come to the island to do that, and perhaps the piracy and pillaging and plundering that happens around the world nowadays is much more sophisticated. So that's a point to make directly in relation to that. And I already prefaced, and I'm having to repeat myself here, so the time on the clock is going. The point I'm making is that we are debating a government plan, sir, and government plans at their very fundamental are about taxing and spending. And taxing is about whether we have direct taxes or indirect taxes. And what we've seen from this government is the fact that they're quite happy to introduce or tweak indirect taxes. And the long-term care charge is a great example of that. It's capped and it features in there. So we have to take the government plan in its round. And this is a specific measure here, sir, which talks about direct taxation on income and on personal income tax. The point I was about to make before is that I had to pinch myself and say, actually, are we debating personal income tax here or are we debating corporation tax? Because there's no suggestion that where anyone's saying change the corporation tax from zero. I've understood that Jersey, as a financial institution, requires the 0% tax rate for financial neutrality, and that's what it markets. But actually, we have several rates of personal income tax. So let's look at how that currently works. If you're at the very bottom, you don't pay personal income tax because even this government and previous governments haven't stooped so low as to tax people who can't afford it. That's why you've got personal allowances. But they will find other ways to tax them through stealth, i.e. through GST and through the AMPOs, which were, as we know, introduced originally to fund a school that never happened. They will happily put those taxes up in excess of RPI when they think it's the thing that they want to do to make sure that those who don't currently pay income tax are caught. Okay, we accept that and we debate that. Now, the next group who pay income tax after an allowance pay the rate at 26%. So your lowest taxpayers in Jersey pay a 26% interest rate on their taxable allowance, correct? Correct. Yes, they do, on their taxable allowance, because
This isn't a conversation, this is a speech.
I'm hearing voices in my head, sir, so I'm responding to them.
It would be helpful if people didn't interject during the course of a speech, even if only because that slows it down. So please do carry on.
Thanks, sir. When I ask these questions, obviously it's a rhetorical device, sir, so I'm not encouraging people to answer. So, correct, we have a 26% tax rate on the taxable allowance because your allowance isn't taxable, right? And everyone's going to get the new allowance under the Reform Jersey proposition. Then the next stage is that if you're the next level up and you have more earnings, therefore you've got more disposable earnings, you only pay 20% tax, but you pay it on all of your income. And then if you're even richer and you're invited to Jersey, because Jersey's not your original tax home, you can pay 1% tax on most of your income. So that's the very definition of a regressive tax rate. I mean, these are not radical ideas, these are not made up, these are just statements of fact. So what Deputy Mezek is trying to do here is say, look, we've already got a pretty good system here with the marginal rate. It allows everybody to have an allowance to live on. It recognises the fact that the people in Jersey who are struggling, and I do ask, especially those who have maybe live in the smaller constituencies who have had time to talk to their constituents, who knocked on doors, and they know in Jersey that it's the middle that's struggling. There's this argument in Jersey, which is perhaps slightly unsophisticated, but probably ultimately true, is that governments have looked after the very poor, and they've looked after the very rich, and it's always those in the middle who are feeling the pinch. That's certainly something we've heard, that's something that we've recognised, and so this proposition is very much to make sure that those in the middle, who are the marginal taxpayers in Jersey, get a little break. It means that those many employees who are looking to come to Jersey at the packages that are here for them don't simply do it on the headline 20% tax rate, which they may not even be paying. They will look at it and say, Jersey's just reduced its tax rate for the majority of its personal income taxpayers from 26 to 25%. That makes it slightly better for me to come to Jersey. I also noticed that Jersey's just introduced free GP visits for students. And I'm relocating to Jersey as a professional, but I also noticed that my children are still at university. So when they come back to Jersey, they'll be able to get free GP visits in Jersey. I also noticed that Jersey has free bus travel for all of its pensioners and for all of its young people, maybe even more young people. And that's also a good reason for me to come to Jersey, because Jersey is becoming slowly a social democratic model, which, let's face it, the UK is moving away from. And we also attract people from not just the UK, but from all over the world. So what I would say to members is that don't be taken in by the idea that this is some kind of radical tax reform. It's actually very simple. It's often complicated, I think, deliberately by ministers or accidentally by other ministers who don't understand it properly. So if you are going to vote against this, do it on the basis that you understand what it is. I think it will come in sooner or later. And the last thing I would add, sir, is that when we hear members of the public blaming government for X, Y, and Z. We have to remember that government can only do what it does with the support of the majority of this Assembly. So I think today we've got a very simple proposition here that says we can move in one direction, which is down the road of more regressive taxation, business as usual, and we know where business as usual gets us, or we can take a proactive measure here, which is targeted. It's a small tweak to our tax system, but more fundamentally, it brings in, according to Treasury figures, sir, somewhere in the region of £11.5 million. Those aren't our figures, those are figures from the government's own Treasury, and that's £11.5 million, sir, which can be spent at Home Affairs on the police and on frontline services. It can be spent in the next few years if we need to give public sector workers an increased pay rise. It can be spent on the public realm, on our roads. It can even be spent in parishes, on developing the public realm there, and it can be spent in education and right across our system. So next time the salami board comes round, sir, or the saucisson, as I know that Senator Deputy Joseph referred to, we can say, actually, we've got a much bigger saucisson and it cost us £11 million, and we're going to give our public something decent to eat.
Deputy Joseph.
So may I give notice? I don't think I can give notice to close the debate immediately under Article 85, but can I give notice for the 30-minute guillotine?
Very well. Notice is given at 10:07.
Sir, can I raise the defo on Deputy Alves, please, sir?
Yes, defo is raised on Deputy Alves. Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Gorst.
Thank you, sir. I will try to be brief. I thoroughly enjoyed the speech yesterday of the leader of the Liberal Conservatives, and often when he's on his feet, I feel a great empathy with the view of the Jersey Liberal Conservatives. Members know where my political persuasions lie. I suppose I just worry about the liberal bit of the Liberal Conservatives. But it is, I do think, it's an important point, because the last speaker has just made it absolutely clear. In his view, he thinks we should move to a social democratic model. That's perfectly legitimate. What he's really saying is we should move to a socialist model. And that's also, and I see the mover of the this proposition is nodding his head, and that's, I think, it's right. This is where we should have our political debate. The mover of this proposition does so as the leader of Reform Jersey. But I read with interest the scrutiny panel's review of the government plan. And one of the scrutiny panel's recommendations, of whom the mover of this proposition is chair of that panel, says the Treasury and Exchequer should undertake modelling exercises to identify the impacts of revenue-raising measures on businesses, the island economy, islanders, and island life. This should be undertaken ahead of delivering all budget measure proposals and future government plans, and should be evidence within the government plan to demonstrate the impact of the proposals. But there is none of that with this amendment. And so I think the scrutiny panel's own recommendation shows why today members should not make this change. We can argue, sir, perhaps we can't, Deputy Scott's not in the chamber, perhaps we can't argue about the number of taxpayers because they're in the tax digest, and I know there's been some confusion about the number of taxpayers. There's currently about 50,000 taxpayers rather than the number that was indicated by another speaker. But it is right that around 4,000 or just over 4,000 pay at the marginal rate. This proposition is masquerading, that pay at the standard rate. This proposition is masquerading as a simple reduction to the marginal rate. It isn't a simple reduction to the marginal rate. It is also the abolition of the standard rate. So let's be clear about that. And there are about just around 4,000 people paying that standard rate, but they're paying 43% of all income tax. And in the opening speech, the mover talked about, well, we don't really have a 20% rate anyway, because we've also got long-term care charge, which is charged through the ITIS system. So islanders who are paying the standard rate are seeing a slight increase. What he then didn't go on to say is, in that case, we are amending the marginal rate, not to 25%, but to 27%. We can't have it both ways. You can't try and add it onto the 20 and then take it off the 25. The reality is that we should not, and I know that we live in an age that says, let's just get everything done as quickly as we possibly can. When it comes to tax policy and tax measures that have served our economy and our island well, and we remind ourselves back to my opening comments, our economic success is built on low tax and on tax competition. And they are not, to my mind, things that we should be ashamed of. They are the basis of our success. And most members of the public that I speak to, and certainly the business community, are concerned that little by little that stability is being undermined. And the Minister for Social Security was right. Every time we give an indication to businesses and to islanders and to the broader economy that actually we're not as stable as I think we are, then we undermine that trust. And that is why we cannot simply today accept this amendment. The other thing I remind members that we're doing is bringing forward changes to independent taxation. And why do I mention that in this debate? Because once we have independent taxation in place, and I'll be lodging those revised regulations next week, dealing with some of the challenges that members wish me to deal with. Once we've introduced independent taxation, then it could be that other changes, other allowances, as some have wanted, we can do a piece of work to look at, in the long and medium term, we might want to look at how we simplify our income tax regime, But it would, to my mind, be irresponsible and foolhardy and the wrong thing to do, and that's just not me making a political statement. Of course, that was a political statement. It is what the movers wearing a different hat, that other hat must be under his seat now, so I'm not sure where it is, unless it's a proverbial three-cornered hat, says we shouldn't do. And it is for those reasons, sir, I don't want to get into numbers and all of those things. It is a simple thing. You change a tax rate that's underlain your economic success and stability for generations. You change it at your peril, and you certainly don't just change it on the back of a amendment to the government plan in the way proposed. So I urge members, even those who think there might be some benefit in it, not to accept this amendment for all of the reasons that I've said and the scrutiny panel have recommended to me as well. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Alves.
Thank you, sir. And I wasn't going to speak because we can often gauge which debates it's actually futile to speak in. But I do want to address some inaccuracies and actually some concerns. I think the first concern is that actually we've got some ministers talking on a tax system that they don't even understand themselves, where they're making statements that are completely inaccurate, although they have now taken that back. And Deputy Gorst actually almost forced me to speak, I think, because he mentioned that on the standard rate, currently 43% of all of our income tax payers are on the standard rate. And I've been hearing a lot of protest against...
Sir, I did not say
So,
that.
are you wishing the Deputy to give way for a point of clarification?
Yes, sir.
Either of your speech or of hers?
Yes, sir. If I said that 43% of income tax is paid by the highest earning decile.
That's fine, sorry, sir, I stand corrected. And I'm hearing a lot of protest, and I heard the word irresponsible as well. So that there are currently people on the standard rate which will be moving to the marginal rate as a consequence of what we're being sold to as independent taxation. Now, so during that debate, which I think it was Deputy Farnham brought forward a proposition on, I asked about what were the figures of those people who are having to move from from the standard rate to the marginal rate as a consequence of independent taxation, and how much that raises. I still haven't had my answers on those figures. The only answers I have had is that actually Treasury were happy to lose out on, I think it was £5 million approximately of tax revenue from moving from the married allowance that are currently in place to the independent taxation. So why was that not said to us as something, radical and something that would really affect people? Because actually there are standard rate payers that are going to be moving to marginal rate under the masquerade, as the Minister has used, of independent taxation, which is being sold to us as obviously a very good thing, because everybody should have rights over their own tax. But it's not really in some cases, because some families are actually being negatively, financially negatively impacted and treated in a better way than other families, depending on when they were married and all of those things. But I won't get into that detail. But I will say to the Minister once again, can I have those figures, or at the very least, or the Assembly, around how much is that raising actually? Just that small consequence from moving those people that are on the standard rate to the marginal rate, or how much are we losing? Because the Minister seems to think that this is a radical idea, but it's already happening under one of his policies. Thank you, sir.
Deputy, it obviously isn't possible for the Minister to answer that. He's spoken already in the amendment debate, and he has no right to speak again.
Thank you, sir. In future, thank you.
Any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak? Deputy Southern.
Sir, I've spoken already in this.
Oh, yes, indeed you have.
However, I do have a question, because I did ask that the Treasury Minister detail what his conclusion is, irresponsible to have the change without consideration.
I'm sorry, Deputy, there is no opportunity for the Treasury Minister to answer any question in connection with this amendment. Because he has spoken already, he has no right to speak again. There's no question facility within standing orders during the debate on a proposition, unless it's to the Attorney General or indeed to the proposer. So unless unless Deputy Mezek can answer the same question, which I doubt in the circumstances is likely to be the case, but that's a matter for him, there's no room to ask the question of the
So there's no study being done?
There's
That's
no.
all right. So I confirm that. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? If no other member wishes to speak, then I close the debate and call upon Deputy Mezek to respond.
Thank you, sir, and thank you to all members who've spoken in this debate, of course, none of which I have to thank more than the Assistant Treasury Minister, whose visceral reaction in opposition to this amendment was demonstrated to be based on completely not understanding it at all. And sir, I would also point out, sir, the graphs provided in the appendices to the report on this were not produced by me, they were produced by the Assistant Treasury Minister's department themselves. For me, sir. So I was also grateful for Deputy Tadyer invoking one of my political heroes, Tony Benn, when Tony Benn spoke about those who advocate for progressive change. He said, first they say you're mad, then they say you're dangerous, then there's a period of silence, and then you can't find anyone who'll ever say they disagreed with you. We've certainly seen that for many of our campaigns that we've led in the last 10 years. But then I think matching that up with what Deputy Balash said about this amendment, he said it would jeopardise Reform Jersey's chances of ever forming a government in Jersey. I'm, of course, very pleased to hear that from the leader of a party with a fifth of the representation that my party has. But I think he's dead wrong on that. I think it's precisely because of advocating progressive policies like this that we'll see working people in Jersey better off at the end of it, that we're getting more traction. And so I have conversations with people across the island who, when we sit and actually explain the detail of this policy, many of them think it's completely reasonable, including those who have politics very different to ours. So I'm not going to betray any confidences by naming anyone here, but I know a very senior leader of a charity in Jersey who agrees with this policy because they believe that it is a sheer pretense that we have a 20% tax rate, and he thinks we ought to be just more open and honest about the fact we don't. So I even had very good conversations with a activist for the late Jersey Progress Party, who had much in common with us when it came to tax policy, because not because he shared our politics, but because of the honesty behind them and being clear about what this does and how it affects Jersey's tax system. But so it is difficult to take any comments, whether they come from Deputy Balash, the Chief Minister, or the Treasury Minister, about claiming that the 20% tax rate in Jersey is so vital for Jersey's economic success and providing us with stability. And it's difficult to take that for two reasons. The first, sir, is we can talk about economic success, but if it's purely numbers on a spreadsheet and not actually matched up with people's real lived experience, then frankly it's meaningless. If people aren't actually better off, if the numbers on a spreadsheet say your economy is healthy, I don't think it's as important as how people actually feel. And in the last decade at least, we've had real terms earning freezes for the majority, growing inequality, whilst the richest have got richer. There was a decade period where the number of people in Jersey earning over £1 million quadrupled, and in that same time, poverty increased here. That is not a sign of a healthy economy. It's a sign of a dangerous trend that, if allowed to carry on in perpetuity, would destroy the island's economic success and everything that goes with that. So that's the first reason that I won't accept any comments on that. The second, sir, is that it isn't true that we have a headline 20% tax rate, and you can repeat it until you're blue in the face. It isn't true, and nobody believes it. And I say nobody believes it because you go out there and say to people, do we have a 20% tax rate? And people will laugh at you because they know it isn't true, because we've introduced stealth taxes to make up for the fact that the income tax system doesn't do what it's meant to do. It doesn't raise the revenue that we need to run public services. That's why a stealth tax had to be introduced in the form of the long-term care tax, a tax which is calculated on the same basis as income tax and collected as you pay your income tax. What's the saying? If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck. Indeed. And so we may as well, frankly, call it income tax because it's collected in exactly the same way and calculated in the same way. That was necessary because we needed to fund long-term care. A previous government attempted to introduce a health tax, which would have been collected, you've guessed it, through the income tax system and calculated on the same basis as income tax. That was defeated in a tied vote in this Assembly, but we know work is going on sustainable health funding, and I'm fully anticipating some kind of taxing or charging mechanism to come as a result of it. And of course, we have, as we've already debated this week, the waste disposal tax. Again, that will be islanders paying more for a service that they already get. Why, sir? Because income tax ain't working. So the government is absolutely clear in its intentions when you scratch beneath the surface that they intend to raise tax. The Chief Minister said in her opening speech that they don't want to, but they are planning to. That is the simple fact, and that's clear in the report for the government plan. And at this point, we have no definite idea of what that will look like, whether it will be, a 1% extra like the LTC was when it was first introduced, whether it'll come in some other form or some other piece of bureaucracy to pay it. That we know is the direction of travel. What this amendment does, sir, firstly, it provides certainty. We're not attempting to mislead anyone or hide from anyone what plans we have on tax. They're as clear as day, and they've been in the public domain for a few years now, so nobody can claim them to be a surprise or a shock to them. We're clear about who's affected in what way by it. And, sir, it actually involves making the system simpler and fairer. Again, the concept of fairness was something that the Assistant Treasury Minister spoke about, and she said she thought she had a different definition of that word to other members in the Assembly, and I can confirm she was correct on that, because this amendment sees people treated the same. It says rather than have this part of our society pay under this regime and the overwhelming majority part of society pay on this regime, they ought to pay on the same regime. To say, just because you're a high earner doesn't mean you shouldn't be eligible for tax allowances. Under this amendment, they'll get those tax allowances. And on their taxable income, after those allowances are taken into account, they'll pay the same as everybody else. So to say that a different regime ought to apply for some is, in my books, the very definition of unfairness. This makes the system fairer. A statistic was raised by both the Chief Minister and the Treasury Minister about, I think the Treasury Minister said it was 43% of the income tax paid came from the top decile of taxpayers. I hope I heard him right on that. That sounds about right to me. So what a damning indictment of what an unequal society we are if, through our income tax system, we're so dependent on the super wealthy. If that's the case that they contribute such a large percentage like that, it's because we're very unequal and the other deciles don't have much income in them. So, do you know, I'd prefer that the lower deciles of income in our society were paying more, but the way you achieve that is by increasing their earnings. That's the way you do that, and I'd prefer to see that. So what a damning indictment on what an unequal society we are. But the Chief Minister spoke about those high earners being mobile and the message that this would send out, what that may do to influence their plans about where they locate themselves and where they'll end up paying tax. I don't know if she's noticed, but it's not just the super rich who are mobile. Everybody is mobile. And the statistics that have been collected by Jersey Statistics are proving that, where their recent report showed that over 2 recent years, in each of those years, around about 900 locally qualified people left Jersey. I don't think that they were exclusively the super rich preemptively escaping the island in the face of an upcoming Reform Jersey government. I think those were mostly middle-class people, probably a fair amount of working-class people too, struggling with the cost of living and thinking that their chances are better off elsewhere. And they are just as mobile, and we're seeing that in the statistics. So let's not pretend that there's a large swathe of our society who are trapped here no matter what policies we impose on them, they can leave too, and they are showing that they are doing so because of the cost of living pressures that they're facing. This amendment would at least, sir, provide them with a very small break when it comes to the income tax they pay, a small reduction, but providing a basis for a tax system that is low, simple, broad and fair. Sir, going back to what Tony Benn said, I don't know what phase of that we're in at the moment. It sounds like we're in the dangerous phase, so I'm expecting a bit of silence next time we raise that. So maybe we've got 2 more goes before we finally get it through. But this is the direction of travel. It's to be more open and honest about the tax that we expect our population to pay, doing it through a clear and cohesive income tax system, rather than the stealth taxes that are on their way under this government, which I don't think is the kind of politics that the public expect. I think they prefer the certainty that comes with this. So I call for the appel, sir.
The appel is called for. Invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on the 7th Amendment, and I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their vote, and I ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been defeated. 11 votes pour, 35 votes contre, no abstentions.
Can we have the 11, please, sir?
Those voting for, Deputies Southern, Tadier, Ward, Alves, Mesic, Coles, Porre, Curtis, Feltham, Kovac and Andrews.
Very well, we move now on to the 3rd Amendment, again by Deputy Mesic, and I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
Paragraph L. After paragraph K, insert the following new paragraph L. To agree that the upper earnings limit, as defined within the Social Security Jersey Law 1974, should be removed, abolishing the upper earnings cap on Social Security contributions and on long-term care contributions, and increasing the estimated closing balance of the relevant funds by 9 million and 8.5 million respectively by the end of 2024, and redesignate the existing paragraph L as paragraph M.
Deputy.
Thank you, sir. This one should hopefully be slightly simpler than the last and more easy to understand. Sir, there is a cap on the amount of long-term care tax and social security contributions for employers that exists in the law right now, above which long-term care taxpayers and employers paying social security contributions will not pay any more on, and that cap sits currently at £276,864 a year. So for most islanders who pay the long-term care tax, we will pay it on the entirety of our taxable income. If you earn above £276,864 a year, you won't pay a penny of that tax on your income above that. That makes it a regressive tax, because as the taxable base increases, the effective rate reduces. The richer you are, the lower a percentage you pay. So for social security contributions for employers, a 2% rate exists up to the £276,864 a year. Above that, nothing is paid. So again, that makes that fit the definition of a regressive tax. It's a long-standing position, not just of myself, I know, but others I've spoken to. In fact, I referred to some of those in my previous speech from other political persuasions who recognise that caps on social security contributions and the long-term care tax are inherently regressive and unfair, and mean that those with the greatest means to be able to afford to pay are afforded privileges that the rest of us don't have, and are able to pay a lower effective rate. So no justification has ever been made for that, and certainly not one that I have ever found to be remotely persuasive. There is no reason why, if you set up a tax to fund a particular public service, that you would have a cut-off point for those who pay it. Social Security contributions paid by employers, in this case, the reason I keep emphasising that is that it's not employees who would pay by this change being made. They wouldn't see theirs go up. It would purely be employers of extremely high-earning employers. If those caps were abolished, sir, we would be able to raise an extra £9 million into the Social Security Fund and an extra £8.5 million into the Long-Term Care Fund. So we know that with an ageing population, we'll have pressures in future years for how much that we have to spend in long-term care. We're already seeing extreme difficulties in recruiting into long-term care because of salary levels that are offered to those who work in that industry. And from social security contributions, as we have an ageing population, people will inevitably end up receiving pensions over a longer period of time. That is, of course, unless the government seeks to raise the retirement age, which I seriously hope they won't be considering doing. So, on the basis that there is no reason for the cap existing other than to provide tax privileges to extremely high earners that don't apply to anyone else in Jersey, and the fact that extra funding into those funds could be used to be beneficial for those who benefit from those services, I see no reason why those caps should continue to exist. And frankly, I regard it as immoral to exempt the super highest earners from taxes that the rest of us pay, and I think it sends out the wrong message to islanders about how we respect the contributions from working people, that we ask them to pay higher percentages than those who are most capable of paying more. So we've had this debate before, and we'll keep having it because that point of principle doesn't change by one defeat in this Assembly, and the unfairness that exists by capping those contributions from the highest earners remains, no matter how many times government ministers try to claim that there's no issue with it. And so I ask members today to finally be the occasion where we end that unfairness in those systems and provide extra funding for the Social Security Fund and Long-Term Care Fund. I make the amendment, sir.
Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Miller.
Thank you, sir. As the Deputy has alluded to himself, there's an element of déjà vu to this debate. As Deputy Mezek again proposed this... Sorry. Shall I start again?
Yes, I don't think you've gone on so long that we should say no.
Sorry. Well, let's not. We did discuss the same amendment in the government plan last year, and I responded last year. And I will just seek to update members on some of the issues that we discussed last year. In the spring of this year, I published actuarial reviews of all three of the Social Security funds. Each fund has its own characteristics. The Social Security Fund is judged to be in a healthy state with reserves that will support the island through the oncoming demographic bulge. Current forecasts suggest that we have at least 5 election cycles ahead of us before any significant action may be needed. Deputy Mezek has just suggested, as did someone yesterday, Deputy Lehegerat, that we're increasing the retirement age. I can confirm to members that we have no plans to increase retirement age, and I simply don't know where that is coming from. Increasing the retirement age beyond 67 is not in my plan, so we don't need to keep talking about that. I can, however, sir, recommend raising extra money from local businesses to pay into the fund at this difficult time. The Long-Term Care Fund is a relatively new fund, and it was set up to help islanders with the increasing level of care costs across the community. The actuarial review here confirms that the fund is fine in the short term, but that actions will be needed in the relatively near future as the fund supports a growing cohort of people aged over 85. Long-term care contributions are collected in a different way to Social Security contributions. For those with incomes too low to pay tax, no LTC contribution is levied, and this low-income group receives all the benefits of the LTC scheme without needing to pay contributions into the fund. Although the headline LTC rate is 1.5%, this is only paid by the top 10% of income taxpayers. Most people will pay a reduced rate calculated in the same way as marginal tax rates. For example, if you have an ITIS rate of 10%, your effective LTC rate is 0.75%. So it's only the highest earners that are paying the full 1.5% on their income up to earnings of 277,000 approximately. At this level, the person will be paying £4,153 a year into the long-term care fund, rounded up by a matter of pence, and they pay that in addition to their income tax. My ministerial plan for 2024 includes a specific commitment to look at the sustainability of the long-term care fund and the income that it collects. This review will look at the options for increasing income, both how and when this should be done, the impact on different income groups, the economic impact of any changes, and the ongoing sustainability of the funds and all other relevant matters at that time. I have to admit to being disappointed that Deputy Mezek has ignored that clear commitment in my ministerial plan and seeks to set political ideology above careful analysis, consultation and economic consideration. I can reassure members that the project will include a review of the use of the upper earnings limit and consider whether the cap should be changed or removed, and that my mind is not closed to changes in that area. These changes would, in particular, and I have to emphasise this, require very careful thought and consultation with relevant stakeholders. I do understand that the position of Reform Jersey is that the removal of these caps as part of their election manifesto. Deputy Mezek has talked about regressive taxation, but unfortunately this theory doesn't really work in terms of the Social Security Fund. As he has said, Deputy Mezek's amendment would affect only businesses and not individual employees. Individual employees pay 6% of Social Security contributions up to maximum earnings of just over £60,000 a year. Once their earnings exceed £60,720 to be accurate, they then pay a fixed amount of £3,643 a year. Changing or removing the upper earnings limit, as this amendment suggests, makes no difference to the contributions paid by individuals at different wage levels. For those members who are concerned about equity, changing the social security system by removing the upper earnings limit does nothing to achieve improved equity. And I would just also remind members that people who earn high earnings are also working people. They don't earn the money by turning up at 9 and going home at 5 and spending the day with their feet on the desk. However, removing the upper earnings limit for social security contributions will impose more cost on businesses at a time when the island is working very hard to improve productivity, to attract new high-value businesses and to encourage entrepreneurship. It is, as it was pointed out to me by a business leader some months ago, a tax on jobs, and we really need those jobs in the island. Imposing a sudden hike in social security contributions with minimal notice, as proposed by this amendment, sends a negative message to the high-value businesses that Jersey relies on to maintain our economy. It would reduce confidence in the stability of our government, and it would reinforce the recent message from the Jersey Business Independent Review that businesses have a low level of trust in government. And I have to remind everybody that government in that context includes all of us. I urge members to reject this amendment and let me continue my planned work on the LTC scheme next year, which will include a review of the income into the long-term care fund and consideration of possible changes to the upper earnings limit for LTC contributions in future years. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy.
Sir, I must apologise to the Assembly and to you. I was a bit slow off the mark in declaring an interest in this matter. It's been recorded previously, but I wanted to raise it.
Thank you very much, Chief Minister. Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? Constable St Brillard.
Thank you, sir. I would be minded to support the gist of this amendment because I think it's not out of place, and I think it's a bit regrettable that the Minister didn't amend the amendment to align with what she's proposing anyway, because I think actually it's going in the same direction. I'm aware, sir, that the long-term care arrangements are tight for the providers with increasing wage costs and inability to recruit staff. It's just getting more and more difficult, and what we're seeing is that the local offering being displaced by UK imports, for want of a better word, which isn't an ideal situation. I think on the basis of, as the Minister suggests, a lack of the economic impact, I don't think the amendment as tabled at the moment can be supported, but I, for one, will be keeping an eye on what the Minister comes up with to progress this discussion, which I think needs to happen. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Chief Minister, I should perhaps have asked, not to simply declare an interest, but could you say what your interest is?
It would have an impact on my household, sir. I think I have set this out previously. As my husband is a partner of a business that would be impacted upon by this.
That's very clear. Thank you very much indeed. Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. This is very interesting when we talk about the long-term care fund, and it's very clear that we need to look at that. And I would suggest that one of the things that will come up is an increase in the percentage of long-term care fund, will inevitably be something that is suggested. And what this change does, it either lessens that, puts it off, or prevents it having to happen. So I want members to think very, very carefully about this, because we've had, and also we're at this point again with constant reviews. We're going to review, we're going to look at it, and during that time, we get closer and closer to the point where we need emergency action because no action is being taken, and we inevitably end up with an increase in the rate for every single taxpayer on the island, as opposed to making this small change now that can address this issue early on. I also want to address this issue of people leaving the island because this would affect them. It's interesting that the Chief Minister declares an interest. I hope this wouldn't make the Chief Minister leave the island with her family, because I would hope that there would be more commitment to this island from those types of people, because there's a recognition of the beauty of this island and all the positive things that go with it, sir. And I think that is not just a simple but pertinent example of where that mythological idea that people will just leave. Look at the people themselves. We're here for a reason, because it's beneficial to us, for our families, for our lifestyle, and we work and we pay our taxes and we contribute to that. I'm pleased to see that it is a simple amendment, and what it does is remove a cap on a contribution. And there will be many, many people on this island who are sat there thinking, well, I pay my contribution on every single part of my salary. But we get to a stage where some people, when they earn an amount of money that I can't even imagine, just simply don't pay any more. And that's a simple view of fairness. And when we get to the point where we end up with long-term care charge increasing for everybody, they're going to sit there and think, so this is even more unfair. Why didn't they deal with that issue first? Because that people can pay. And as for this notion that, I've got to say as well, sir, there's an insinuation that there was something said about work 9 to 5 and don't just put their feet up on the desks. I'd like to say, sir, to the people out there who are working 9 to 5 in their jobs, I don't think you sit there and put your feet up on the desks. of those who aren't the highest earners. I know that you can work and contribute to this island. I think we have to be very minded in the way that we address working people on this island who are sat there committing to their work every single day. And I really wish that there would be some thought as to what's said about people outside of this chamber a little bit more, and address working people with more consideration and more respect. But that's just something I feel I have to say personally. Finally, sir, just to very quickly say, the Social Security Fund, this is an opportunity to increase the amount of money available in the Social Security Fund, and we have a catch-22 situation always here. If we ever try and look at more spend on the Social Security Fund to increase provision, we're told, well, we can't because it will take money out of the Social Security Fund. But then when we say this is a scheme to put more money into the Social Security Fund, we're told we don't need any money to put into the Social Security Fund. You cannot have both of those things. And I think we've seen too many, and this is interesting when we have a long debates, where again and again and again, the same poor, circular, unfounded arguments are made. And at some point, I think we've got to recognise that they don't wash. So this is a simple move. It's something that will happen inevitably. Let's do it now. Let's recognise that it's needed now, rather than waiting for review after review after review, and in a few years' time, we inevitably increase the long-term care fund. And simply, sir, I do not believe that the retirement age will not be affected. I don't think many believe that will be the case, because that is the simplest way to address this issue, and it will be the emergency way because we haven't acted soon enough. So be very wary of what you're voting for here and what you're dismissing. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? If no other member, Deputy Captain Curtis.
Thank you, sir. The upper earnings cap is wrong. It's the sort of thing that people in future will look back on as something ridiculous from the past. At some point, this Assembly will abolish it. There's no rational defence of the upper earnings cap. High earners will not leave because they're asked to pay a reasonable amount of social security. The upper earnings cap is an antiquated privilege and should be made obsolete. By abolishing it, Jersey will receive an extra £17.5 million in revenue. I urge members to be the Assembly that's the one to finally abolish this out-of-date and inequitable nonsense and thereby add to our revenue.
Any other member? Deputy Ferry.
Thank you, sir. The move of this amendment on behalf of Reform Jersey colleagues has put forward a purely political amendment based on a manifesto commitment. The Deputy is quite clear that this is his sole motivation, but there has been no review to identify that this extra funding is needed, no analysis of the impact of the proposed change, and no consultation with business or the public. I hold the Assembly, sir, in high regard. As elected members, it is our solemn duty to take decisions based on a clear understanding and good evidence. We should not be driven purely by political ideology. As such, I cannot support this amendment. The Minister for Social Security has already confirmed her ministerial plan, which was published in September, includes a clear commitment to consider the substantiality of the long-term care fund. And that review will include looking at the income coming into the fund and the use of the upper earnings limit within the long-term care fund. The Social Security Fund and its associated reserve fund are worth around £2 billion. Our pensions are secure for many years to come. Deputy Mezak talks about regressive taxes and inequality. The Social Security Fund is not a tax system, and the change proposed would only affect businesses, not individuals. Removing the upper earnings limit from the social security system will make no difference to income inequality between workers. I urge members to reject this amendment, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No. Deputy Scott.
Yes, just to say that although you might not regard this as tax, I was just looking at the comments of the council ministers, and it was referring to the fiscal policy panel, indeed referring to one reason for not supporting this not to increase taxes, and actually indicating that there are some tax rises in the proposed government plan. These are targeted and designed to drive behavioural changes. I don't particularly feel that I personally feel a bit cynical about that. I do feel that I would like to see more of this joined up thinking. It's a bit frustrating hearing we're waiting for another review and then we'll come back to you. And indeed, perhaps in terms generally of the social security review that the results were actually promised back in June or in the summer, they still haven't really come through. So I won't be supporting this proposition because of that, but I do feel that in terms of delivery, sir, that it would be somewhat more edifying if the actual government did deliver in the times that they said it would.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to. Deputy Tadier.
Yeah, just very quickly, sir. I just wanted to address the business, the point of view from a business. Something that's always bothered me slightly is that if a business relies on employing a greater number of employees at a lower or middle wage, they're going to have to pay the full rate of social security contributions for all of them. But if you happen to just rely on perhaps a fewer number of very highly paid staff, the effective rate that you're paying towards the social security contributions as an overall proportion of your tax bill is much less, and I don't think we can get away from that fact. I'm willing to say that this is actually, I think, a very good proposition and amendment here. Of course it is. And I also noticed that we've heard from a number of speakers outside the party who are actually have encouraged both the Minister to work towards this and who have said that they're not sure if they're supporting it this time, but might be inclined to support it in the future. And I would encourage them, especially those who have brought propositions to do with the Social Security Fund more generally, because there's a recognition here that the health of the Social Security Fund and the need to keep it replenished into an uncertain future is very important. And I think the need to be able to do that in a much more sustainable way. So it's interesting that some of the arguments against this that have come forward are actually saying, well, you haven't included employees in it. And clearly one of the reasons, I suppose, that employees haven't been included in that is because the rates at which earners would be hit if the cap were to be lifted and put to the full amount completely straight away would obviously take a lot of those middle earners that I think we and others are trying to help into perhaps a more negative situation. So if members are inclined to not support this because they don't think it penalises employees, that's a very interesting state of affairs. And if they've got a way forward or amendments that they obviously haven't brought now, but they might wish to bring in the future, then I think that a conversation needs to be had across the Assembly, because I think we do very much have a working proposition, and I hope that the Minister recognises that fact in future.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak, then I close the debate and call upon Deputy Mesic to respond.
Thank you, sir, and thank you to members who've spoken in this debate. I can't help but wonder, having listened to the Constable of St Brelard, where we're getting to the final stage of that Tony Benn commentary on how people respond to positive changes. And I think that's because there really is no justification for providing tax caps for the highest earners in Jersey. And so it was kind of ironic, really, when Deputy Ferry said that we can't make these kinds of decisions driven by ideology. Well, if you were genuinely not driven by ideology and you were starting with a clean sheet, you wouldn't be proposing tax caps. You would say charge it across the board. That would be the non-ideological position. The ideological position, the Tory ideological position, which his party espouses, is to focus on tax privileges for the rich, and hopefully the wealth will trickle down. That is an ideological position, sir, and if we also want to talk about consultation and evidence, I would say, sir, that if you believe in trickle-down economics, you may as well believe in the tooth fairy, because there's about as much evidence for both of those positions, sir. The Assistant Minister for Social Security also said the social security system is not a tax. You might have been able to hear people laughing outside the chamber, sir, because I think most working people in Jersey would regard it as a tax, because they pay it out of their pay packets and it goes into services that they'll get one day. It's pure sophistry. I know it's not titled income tax, but to all intents and purposes, that is what people regard it as. It's absolute madness that members will say it's not a tax. For goodness sake, of course it is. It's just a different type of tax. Deputy Miller said that she'll consider the issue of the caps in a subsequent review. It's great to secure that commitment. It probably spells the death knell for this proposition. We see members do that from time to time. And she said her mind wasn't closed on it. If you listen to her speech on this same debate last year, it certainly was closed then. So I don't have much optimism for that review. But so there were two comments she made that have to be addressed. She used the phrase tax on jobs. Let's be absolutely clear, it is already a tax on jobs, social security contributions. It's a tax on my job, it's a tax on your jobs, it's a tax on jobs for most of the working people out there in the island, but it currently isn't a full tax for those earning above £277,000 a year. We're saying apply the same tax that the rest of us have to pay across everybody's income. So it's not a new tax, it's not an extra tax, it's the same tax that already exists. And sir, you want to talk about businesses operating here, so most businesses will not be affected a single penny by this because they don't employ people on such high salaries. This is only for the really, really high value jobs, those above £277,000 a year. And I'm not being funny, but if you're on that kind of income, I mean, you're pretty lucky compared to what the average salary is in Jersey. I think it's well over 5 times the average salary. So, I mean, come on, for goodness sake. So the minister also referred to, I think it was a survey, or I can't remember exactly which one she was citing, about businesses having low trust in government. Well, if you're a hospitality business, I don't blame you for having low trust in government because of the attitude on alcohol duty. If you're a business that suffered through the co-funded payroll scheme and the appeals process after that, I don't blame you for having low trust in government. But as I said, sir, most businesses would not be affected a single penny from this, so I don't see why the issue of trust for them would come into it. So I thank Deputy Tadjer for explaining some of the maths here, that businesses that employ lots of people will as a proportion pay more in social security contributions than those who employ a small number of people but on very high salaries. So, again, you want to talk about tax on jobs. It's a tax for the many and not the very small number of very high paying ones there. So again, sir, as with the previous amendment, we make no apologies for bringing this proposition. Again, I know of plenty of people out there in society with politics that are very different to mine who recognise that the tax caps here are unfair, unjustifiable, and they do nothing but serve as a symbol of inequality, that we're prepared to offer privileges for the super high earners, but for most working people, they're not entitled to those things, and it sends out all the wrong messages to them. So, sir, I ask members to perhaps save some time, because it sounds like we're on our way to getting there when we can have members who, again, don't share my politics, saying they have sympathy with what is trying to be achieved here because they know it makes sense, and hopefully we can skip some of those phases and get to that point where we get the inevitable done, because this will happen in years to come. It's simply an unsustainable position to argue for tax privileges for the super wealthy when nobody else gets to benefit from them. So I call for the appel, sir.
That is called for. I invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on the third amendment. Members have had the opportunity of returning to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. If members have had the opportunity of casting their vote, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been defeated, 12 votes pour, 33 votes contre, no abstention.
So can we have the two, please?
Come with the 12, please, sir.
Oh.
Yes, so the 10 plus 1 is what I mean. 10 plus 2. I'll start again, sir. Can I have the 12, please?
Those voting for the Connotab of St Martin, Deputy Southern, Tadier, Ward, Alls, Mezek, Coles, Porre, Curtis, Faltham, Kovac and Andrews.
Deputy Hull, did you have a point you wish to raise?
Please, may I raise the defo on Deputy Jean, sir?
Defo is raised on Deputy Jean. The next matter for debate is the 11th amendment proposed by Deputy Andrews, and I ask the greffier to read that amendment.
Paragraph L. After the words as set out at Appendix 3 of the report, insert the words, except that on page 9, after the words to enter the housing market, there should be inserted the following new paragraph. The assisted purchase home ownership scheme will be amended to allow a greater number of first-time buyers to be supported through a reduction of the shared equity loan to between 5 and 15% of market value.
Yes, Deputy.
Thank you very much, sir. Firstly, I would just like to commend the work of the previous Housing Minister, Deputy Mezek, who worked tremendously hard to secure the funding for this first-time buyer scheme last term, sir, in his time as Housing Minister. Sir, I think it's inevitable that Jersey's housing market is in a very extreme position where, as Deputy Otis said, we're in a housing emergency, and I think that was said at the last sitting, and I certainly do share the same sentiment. And what we are seeing is a generation of perpetual renters who are seeing their incomes stagnate, and we're seeing high inflation, and also we've seen house price inflation as well, really be very extreme in Jersey, and we are seeing the relationship between renting and then home ownership becoming a weaker relationship with those who are renting, and partly the reason is down to a couple of things. We just need to look at the distortion we see in our housing market. There is a finite supply, and that is really adding to the pressures in terms of rental costs. Now, compounding this issue, we've also got Andium Homes, and their rental policy is 80% of the equivalent of the private sector when the market is distorted and it's in a position of partial market failure. So the market is not in an entire collapse position, but it certainly is in partial failure because there is inadequate supply to meet the demands of households and households' needs. So looking at this first-time buyer scheme that we have before us, I know it's obviously taken a bit of time to get there in the end in terms of being prescriptive with a first-time buyer scheme. And the scheme in the government's literature, the shared equity loans between 5 to 40% of the value of a property. But in the comments paper, it's allegedly 10 to 40%. So I don't understand why there is a discrepancy once again in the comments paper. However, sir, there is an unintended consequence by setting a shared equity loan at 40%, sir, and that is really for one-bedroom households, because what we need to be looking at here is longer term, instead of looking short term in terms of how can we support those households who are renting, who want to be those first-time buyers. Because really the problem lies here is upon the discharge of a property, sir, where the household is going to be receiving 60% of the proceeds, and they may want to, say, move on to another one-bedroom unit, for instance, and they do not have sufficient level of proceeds to then acquire another property. And what that basically means is there is a risk that some households may need to revert back to renting, sir. And we just need to look at instances where, say, people have mechanical issues, such as, you know, a knee replacement, or they might have had, say, a hip replacement, and the home that they are living in is no longer adequate for them. Now, that would also put the person in a very difficult disposition, because financially they are stuck. And what really is of concern to me, sir, is when I was reading the comments paper, sir, the Minister, I think, is fully aware of this. However, it was mentioned as one of the bullet points in response to the comments that I made in my amendment. And I quote, sir, providing subsequent opportunities for homeowners who benefited from the first step scheme to move up the property ladder and purchase again through an assisted home ownership scheme when their personal circumstances change. But sir, this is a pilot scheme. Why are we speaking about a home ownership scheme in 50 or 60 years' time when the legislature is going to be far different and most of us will probably be dead? So I really am mystified as to why that statement is made in the comments paper, sir, because I think it's unintended, sir, but it's a statement that has been made, and I think it is, to a certain extent, sir, without, you know, causing any offence to somebody, misleading. So what we are technically seeing here is the government is saying, well, look, we are going to assist you to right-size in the future if there is unintended consequences. Well, I'm afraid we don't know who the Chief Minister will be and who the Council of Ministers will be in 50 or 60 years' time when this problem arises. So I think what is happening is we are seeing a promise that is in place in this comments paper, and this is only a statement that has arisen to oppose me, sir. That is all it is. So I don't think that statement can at all be taken in all seriousness, sir. And I think we have to be very, very careful about going forward with this scheme in its current form. And I think there has to be some degree of revision to the scheme because it's not fit for purpose as it currently stands. Now, it's not to say that we are saying we're not going to be helping first-time buyers, because we've already got Andium Homes who are doing a very, very good job, and they are supporting first-time buyers year upon year. But this open market scheme, sir, it's not about supporting first-time buyers to buy a home that is a new build. This is for older homes that have been previously lived in as well. And we're seeing shared equity loans at up to 40%. Now, what about the time when we are disposing of the property, sir? It's going to be a lot more difficult to dispose of. And also, we've got to factor in here that credit lenders, they want to be in a confident position that the person who's living in the property that they own until the mortgage is then paid off is capable of not having to then incur renovation costs. And that is also something that we've got to factor in here. Now, I know the Minister is also going on about staircasing. Well, unfortunately, I hate to tell him, sir, but somebody who's got a 40% shared equity loan is probably not in a position where they can staircase throughout the duration of the mortgage being paid off. It's probably only those who are going to be paying a lesser shared equity loan will that then be applied, because they are in a position where they are higher earners and they've got more income to then pay off the debt obligation through staircasing, sir. Now, even when I was looking at some of the comments in the comments paper to the amendment, what we were seeing is fixed figures from 2022. Now, looking online, you know, in terms of when we're looking at 1, 2 and 3 bedrooms, property values are actually less compared to what has been put on the paper. So when we're looking at, say, a 3-bedroom property, I saw numerous properties that were about £500,000, £550,000. And even looking at, say, 1-bedroom properties, I saw about 35 to 40 properties that were under £250,000. So what we're seeing is, oh, this is a scheme to support those who are on earnings between £44,000 and £69,000. But I think we could actually be assisting some of those earners who are slightly lower earners, but we just need to be looking at how we can provide a bit more flexibility within the scheme, because as far as I'm concerned, the scheme is too rigid and there will be unintended consequences. And I'm sorry, but I do not want to allow first-time buyers to be misled potentially to say, well, look, we will help you as a States Assembly, we will get you onto the property ladder, and then in 50, 60 years' time, we are not there to be held to account for a decision that is an improper decision and that is going to affect these people. in the long run, sir. So I'm very happy to move this proposition, sir, and I hope to hear from my colleagues, sir.
Is the proposition seconded?
Seconded to allow the debate to go ahead.
Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. I'm hoping to keep this speech fairly short and to the point. A lot of work has gone into developing the First Step scheme, leading to a policy that will offer between 10 and 40%. I'm not quite sure, so I'm looking at the comments page where Deputy Andrews got 5% from, so, but I'm aware that it says 10 to 40, to help first-time buyers with the purchase of their first home. I want to help lower to median income first-time buyers who aspire to be homeowners but could never afford a mortgage on their own. It's a sad fact that, yes, a contribution of up to 40% of the price of a home is needed to bridge the affordability gap for those individuals, particularly those with families who need a larger home. 5 to 15% isn't enough to help those families. My scheme will help those islanders, lifelong renters, who thought they may never have the opportunity to purchase a home. Though I must highlight that my scheme will be lending up to 40%, some people may need less, which will mean more people can be helped, just as the Deputy would like to see. But, sir, it is vital we have the flexibility to meet different needs, especially in light of current market conditions. My scheme will reduce the amount of deposit required, as well as the amount of mortgage borrowed. It's not just acquiring the property, it's about meeting the monthly repayments as well. So my First Step scheme has been scrutinised by economists, banks, property lawyers, and estate agents. They have been hugely supportive of how I have approached the scheme. These people know what they are talking about. They're out there at the coalface. They have to deal with the disappointment of first-time buyers being unable to access the housing market on a daily basis. Deputy Andrews' amendment is going to severely hinder our ability to help these people. We therefore cannot accept this. Finally, just to pick up on a few other points raised by the Deputy in his amendment, I want to assure members that there will be options for anyone wanting to move up the ladder if they choose to sell their home. I will allow staircasing to full ownership over time. Bear in mind, sir, that if you buy a home, your income, if you develop on in your role in employment, you will have a greater level of income. You will have that first step on the ladder, and therefore there's no reason to dismiss the fact that some people will be able to staircase their way through this scheme. I'm also thinking about possibly allowing purchasers to what we call port their loan and use it to buy a larger property. I also want to highlight that we have other assisted purchase schemes. Andium Home Buy offers a 25% deferred payment. The average bond in 2023, for your information, has been around 22%, suggesting that this is the level that purchasers need in these difficult times. Andium is also building 1,000 new homes to be sold through the Home Buy scheme by 2030. And let's not forget that the rezoned housing sites from the Bridging Island Plan will also offer opportunities for up to 400 first-time buyers. There are opportunities out there and more are to come. I met the Deputy last month to discuss the many issues with the amendment. I do think he understands where I'm coming from on all of this, but here we are having this debate anyway. So I'm not going to go any further on this now. I urge members to read my published comments on the amendment, trust in the fact that my team and I have done a lot of work on the First Step scheme. What we have proposed gets it right. I also urge members to reject this because we want to get on with the scheme. I was criticised yesterday by Deputy Balash for the delays. I've been criticised by Deputy Mezek for the delays. We do not want to see any further delay in this scheme. I urge, as I say, urge members to reject to ensure that we can get on and help islanders with this first step into home ownership in a meaningful way and without further delay. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes. Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. I seconded the proposition to enable the debate to go ahead because I think there are some absolutely reasonable points in what Deputy Andrews has proposed, and it's worth having the debate about what the right levels of support are. That's an entirely legitimate debate to have. He doesn't have my support on this amendment, though I won't be voting for it because I think that if you reduce the percentage that you're willing to offer people, okay, that means you could potentially help more people, but they will be at the relatively more affluent end of the spectrum compared to what you can, compared to the types of people you can help if you can offer a greater percentage. Deputy Andrews is absolutely right to say that if you have a relatively lower percentage ownership in your property, that when it comes to the time for you to move on, it's hard to do that because you then have a smaller amount that you can end up cashing in on to then find a bigger home that you won't be getting shared equity support. So he's right there. But there are ways around that. The main way around that is that you offer a particular deferred payment at the start of your ownership of that home, and then if your financial circumstances improve, you can offer to sell them the outstanding balance at that point, and you might even get to a point where you've got 100% ownership on it, and then you are ready then to move on and be able to cash in on that. So there's all kind of details like that that you can work out, I think, to mitigate that, and that's the basis upon which that myself and my colleagues won't support this particular amendment. But the First Step scheme is very, very good in principle, but let's be frank, it's not going to help many people. And despite the words of the Housing Minister about not wanting to delay, he literally just the other day said no to more money going into that scheme because we have to wait a year to see if it needs more money in it. I mean, I call that rank hypocrisy to level that charge at another member whilst being completely guilty of it himself. So we ought to get behind the First Step scheme because in its concept it is absolutely the right thing to do to help people who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford home ownership, and to bring homes that are currently in the private sector into the first-time buyer market is something we ought to be doing as much of as possible, because even though that's not about creating new supply, it's about reducing future demand, because then those homes can't end up in the hands of investors who want to buy them and charge extortionate rents on it. So that scheme is worth getting behind, but it's worth getting behind to a much greater, more vociferous degree than the current government appears to be prepared to do. So I'm sorry to Deputy Andrews to not be able to support this amendment because he makes fair points in preceding it. But there ought to be other ways of supporting the First Step scheme. I don't have any confidence that those in government opposing Deputy Andrews have got the answers either, though.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak. Then I close the debate and call upon Deputy Andrews to respond.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I'm going to be very quick. I think I've made my points that I outlined in my initial speech, so I call for the appel, sir.
Those called for, invite members to return to their seats. At least one or two members leaving the Assembly got whiplash at the shortness of this speech. They need to return. If members have had the opportunity of returning, members have had the opportunity of returning to their seats, then I ask the greffier to open the voting. The vote is on Deputy Andrews' amendment number 11. Members have had the opportunity of casting their vote. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been defeated. 1 vote pour, 42 votes contre, no abstentions.
Can we have
Yes, I don't think we need to read out the one. Very well. The next is the 30th amendment brought by Deputy Howell. Deputy, is this something that A, you would like to have read as amended by your own amendment to it, and B, are you accepting the amendment of the Council of Ministers?
Yes, sir, I would like both of those things, please. Thank you.
Then are members content if we read this as amended by the Council of Ministers and by the amendment of the Deputy itself, and that will give us one debate. Very well. If the referee could read, please, the amended proposition.
Paragraph L. After the words are set out at Appendix 3 of the report, insert the words, except that on page 10, after the words 3 million on an ongoing basis, there should be inserted the following. The funding provided for the public health function is predicated upon a freeze on any recruitment within the service, excluding legally required positions, whether due to increases in staff numbers or fulfilment of vacancies, until a full business case for the public health function has been produced, scrutinised and approved by the State's Employment Board.
Deputy, yes.
Thank you, sir. I'm not too sure what I have to do now. I'm accepting the...
Well, at the moment,
Yes.
you've proposed an amendment to the government plan.
Yes.
The form of the amendment is now as changed by your own amendment to it and by the Council of Ministers amendment. I don't know if the Council of Ministers would be minded to accept that amendment now in its current form, but whether it is or not, the Assembly still has to vote upon it because it wasn't read in that amended form. So I think, given the indication is the Council of Ministers now accept it, you might wish to make the proposition but in shortened form, so that if there is any debate upon it, then it can be dealt with rather more quickly.
Please, can I call for the appel, sir?
I don't know. That is in even more shortened form than I had in mind. I think what you can do is you could, if you wish, make the proposition.
Thank you, sir. I just brought this proposition because I feel that the Public Health Department has grown considerably over the last 3 years, from 7 staff in 2019 to 61 now, and it has not been scrutinised, and I just feel that we should look at... I really support public health. It does a great job. We need it to keep down obesity and diabetes. We need they're coping with PFAS. But it's just to scrutinise what is going on, and that's why I brought this amendment, sir. Thank you.
Well, is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Scott.
Yes, sir. I support this amendment, and I do hope that there might be some opportunity for some of the perhaps just the pay structure itself being looked at, because it's rather disturbing to read reports that there are posts being advertised in terms of managing things like a voice for the Speak Up Guardian, yes, the Speak Up Guardian, and also managing health rotas, which are advertised at salaries when we also hear that junior doctor gets something in the of the region of much less. So I very much welcome the ministers being receptive to this, but I do hope that more work will be done.
Very much. Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. I've got to say, it confuses me, this amendment, because what we're saying is that there is a freeze on positions until there's an agreement by SCB for a department that has been rearranged. And actually the increase in the number of people in public health is because they've been moved from one section to another. What needs to happen is some clarity on what the role of the public health, now it's increased, is, so that we can actually make a real genuine, or have a real genuine understanding of what that public health department is going to do in its fuller form. I don't know how the decisions are going to be made on this. And I've got to say that what the government is trying to do here, I think, is deflect away from I don't know what, in order to do, I'm not entirely sure, in order to have an outcome which we're not entirely clear about. And I would put this whole situation down as I would characterise it, so I'm afraid, as a bit of a dog's dinner. So we have a public health department that has grown, in inverted commas, because there's been a reallocation of jobs into a different department. There needs to be clarity on what's happening there. There absolutely does need to be clarity on what's happening there. Where are those jobs coming from and to, and why have they been moving to the public health department? There's also a part of an amendment that seems to have thought at the end that says, but we must be careful though, because some of those jobs might be legally required, i.e. The person in charge of public health, which is a legal requirement for the government. And and we're left with a compromise that was decided across the Assembly with a few chats in the background, which I don't think is entirely necessary at all. I think this whole thing could have been removed and we could have just sat down and understood what the Public Health Department is actually about. These are jobs within the Health Department. It's nothing to do with the Speak Up Guardian. The Speak Up Guardian is a completely separate issue. And I think, sir, and I have to say my frustration on this, that entirely within the Health Department, there are so many convoluted issues being raised together that we can't see the wood for the trees. It is making scrutiny almost impossible. We're getting voices from outside which I'm not entirely sure what we're aiming to achieve, but if there are problems in the background, in government, with health and between government, please sort them out before you come to this Assembly, rather than waiting until the last minute, doing something on the floor of the Assembly and bringing us a mishmash. I had to email Sir De Greffio, that was my question at the beginning, as to whether the SEP part would still be in the amendment, because the amendment of the amendment didn't include a part about the SEB, but now it's been read clearly. I thank De Greffio for making it clear. And so I'm minded to vote against this because it's simply not necessary. And forgive my frustration, sir, but it's becoming almost impossible with battles going on to undertake a real understanding of the structure of where we are. And I don't think this helps. I understand what's happening in trying to fix something and to placate, and I understand the intention around the original amendment, because there is I think, a misunderstanding. However, it's been brought to the Assembly, but I think we've compounded that misunderstanding. I won't say any more, but I do need to get that off my chest, sir, seeing as I'm trying to deal with the health scrutiny. Thank you, sir.
Health Minister.
Thank you, sir. I agree with some of the sentiments that have been expressed, in the sense that we have actually inherited a number of public health functions that need organisation and coordination. And that is exactly what we're trying to do, which is to bring some coherence to the public health function to take us forward. And that might look like growth, but in actual fact, this is people who have been fulfilling public health responsibilities for a number of years. And the attempt through the Council of Ministers is to try and, as I say, bring some coherence to those functions. So the Council of Ministers is proposing a simple amendment to Deputy Howell's amendment, because what we're actually talking about here is people's jobs and functions, and that is why we've made a reference to the business case, which Deputy Howell refers to, being submitted to the SEB in relation to any changes that we make as a result of our review of the public health function. I would ask the Assembly to support this, because it is looking to ensure that there is absolutely no ambiguity about what a public health service and a public health function looks like in the island. And I have recently submitted a paper to the scrutiny panel that details the functions and the number of posts assigned to a public health responsibility, which I hope will be open to further scrutiny. If we don't accept this amendment to the amendment today...
Well, so the amendment, it's been read as amended.
Sorry.
So the vote is simply on whether the amendment, as amended by Deputy Howell's own second amendment and the Council of Ministers amendment, will be adopted. You don't have to argue for the amendment. It's on the main proposition that we're arguing.
Okay, thank you, sir. I was just going to make a comment in relation to Deputy Ward's concerns, but I accept that and I will move on. As members will know, sir, as I've just said, I have submitted a detailed paper to the scrutiny panel for their review, and it does respond to the number of recommendations that they have highlighted. And I hope this has been helpful to members and hope that they would support this amendment on the back of that. And happy to provide any further answers to any other questions that people have during this debate. Thank you, sir.
Well, unfortunately, of course, you will not be able to provide answers because you've now spoken.
So
You're done. It's in case members leap up and seek to take advantage of a non-opportunity. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Feltham.
Thank you, sir. Oops.
Deputy Feltham. I saw Deputy Feltham's light first and called upon her.
Thank you, sir. I have to say I'm quite surprised and concerned actually about the Council of Ministers supporting this amended amendment on the basis that this kind of work should be happening anyway for any kind of recruitment and any kind of restructured department. So including reference to one area in particular rather suggests to me that it's not happening as a matter of course when it should be. Also, I note that, well, my understanding, and I'm going to look to ministers for a nod, is that the public health function now sits within the Cabinet Office and the Cabinet Office budget. Now, the Public Accounts Committee have been pointing out to accountable officers and have been asking accountable officers for business cases in relation to the changes for the Cabinet Office and that Cabinet Office restructure. And we have been told that that business case doesn't exist and that we can't have it. That's the business case that I want to see for the whole of the Cabinet Office. And by accepting this amendment, what States members are effectively saying is, don't worry about that, that's all being done, but we're going to pick up on public health. So this is why I don't understand the logic of ministers accepting and making the amendment first to this amendment and then accepting it, because it rather suggests that we don't expect it to happen as a matter of course for every other area. The other reason that I object to this amendment is because I'm aware that recruitment freezes can be incredibly risky, particularly if a key member of staff, and I accept that this now amended amendment doesn't include legally required members of staff, but that doesn't mean that somebody that's not legally required isn't an essential member of staff. So if a vacancy were to arise during this recruitment freeze, I would be very highly concerned about the impact of that if a business case hadn't been forthcoming in that time, considering that we've been able to structure a whole Cabinet Office without one. If a business case wasn't come forward in that time, that actually we wouldn't then be able to be in a position to recruit an essential position. So I won't be supporting this amendment to the amendment, but I would expect that business cases would be going to the SEB as a matter of course for absolutely every single area of every single department.
Deputy Ferry.
Thank you, sir. Sorry to jump up early on Deputy Feltham there. Began with an F and that's all I heard. Firstly, sir, I'd just like to say thank you to Deputy Howe for meeting with myself and public health colleagues the other week to get a better understanding of the whole situation. I think that was really useful part of this process, so I thank her for that time. And as a member of States Employment Board, I'm grateful for her accepting that amendment whereby business cases will come through that board so that they can be properly scrutinised, sir. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. And I'd just like to speak in favour of the public health team, and I understand that the team has grown since COVID, but I think there are several areas of work that perhaps members aren't aware that the team carry out. It's not just immunisation programmes, but they are a vital input into improving child nutrition in the island. And indeed, when I was formerly the chair of the BFI, the breastfeeding steering group locally, a member of the public health team is part of that steering group and makes a really important contribution to the work of that group. There is much policy development ongoing regarding sexual health and indeed women's health. We have a women's health political oversight group which the Health Minister has set up and I am a member of, along with several other ministers and assistant ministers. And this is a large piece of work which the public health team, again, are critical towards delivering. And indeed, so it's important to all ministers that we take an evidence-based approach to how we improve outcomes across our population. And this is the very core of the public health team. They use evidence to inform ministers which policies to pursue in the best interest of the population. And some of the recent conversations we've been having in SIPES is that we would like to improve our parenting programmes, and doing this in partnership with the health department and the public health team as a critical part of this is something that is really important to us and will deliver evidence-based outcomes for children and families. So I would like to support the public health team, and I hope that members will also do so.
Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. As members have heard, the government chose to amend Deputy Howe's amendment in order to give greater level of certainty to those hardworking members of our public health team who are working on important projects that have been outlined by previous speakers. I simply wanted to add that we are very grateful to Deputy Howe for listening to this discussion and for working with us to achieve this. But I also would simply like to add, in response to Deputy Feltham's comments, that of course she is very well positioned as the chair of the Public Accounts Committee to consider such questions, and of course being a person with a keen eye for detail, we have the greatest of respect for her in her role, which is an important one to fulfill in our structure. However, of course, as the Deputy is aware, the role of the Public Accounts Committee is to look back once matters have been implemented and to assess the success of their implementation. Therefore, I do have to remind the Assembly that some of the information that the Deputy is currently requesting, it relates to matters that are policy under development, and therefore it would not be proper to share at this point with the Public Accounts Committee. But I can assure the Deputy that there is a high level of scrutiny when restructuring bids or even P59s, which are requests for appointments to roles of over £100,000 salary. That there is a robust process in the current States Employment Board. In fact, it has met with some questioning as people coming to the board had not previously been expected to receive such a level of scrutiny. But we believe it's absolutely proper when considering the use of public money to ask questions and to challenge and make sure that the board members are assured and reassured that public money is being spent wisely and to the best effect to deliver the best possible quality services that we can deliver as an island. And that is what we do. We take that role with the greatest of seriousness, and I urge members to support this amended amendment.
Very much.
Sir, could I just raise a point of order about something that the Chief Minister just stated?
Well, is it a point of order or is it a point of clarification?
I think it's actually a point of clarification, to be honest.
So, Chief Minister, do you give way for a point of clarification?
Yes, sir.
What's the point of clarification then?
The Chief Minister just alluded to the Public Accounts Committee requesting information that was not within our remit. In relation to this particular amendment,
it's not open to you to offer a speech in order to clarify. You can ask the Chief Minister to clarify something that she said, but it must be a point of, could she clarify if, something like that.
yeah, could the Chief Minister clarify exactly what she meant there?
I think, sir, that in her speech, the Deputy suggested that she had made requests for restructuring bids that may or may not be being prepared at this moment. And I was simply reminding the Deputy, as she well knows, that the work of the Public Accounts Committee is to look back and assess implementation. And therefore, it does not seem that it is fitting of that role to request policy under development.
Well, that is whether you agree with that or not. That the Chief Minister has clarified what she meant.
Thank you, sir. I'll follow that up in writing.
Does any other member wish to speak? Deputy Joseph.
So very briefly, I'm very happy to rise as an Assistant Health Minister for I think the first time, just to simply say that I am aware in relation to this issue that public health has been previously funded in maybe a confusing and unscrutinisable way because it's not been clear, because the funding of public health has been funded by the Jersey Care model, which was previously in health, by building a safer society, which I understand was in Home Affairs, and also various COVID budgets. What I've learned is that we have a minister, the health minister, that is looking at public health in a proper way, in a joined-up way, that will clarify matters that members are clearly concerned about, because it's understandable that there has been confusion. But let there be no doubt at all that the Minister is seized upon this issue, is properly dealing with it, putting it in the right place, and there has been some confusion and there is none. And I'm grateful for Deputy Howell having brought the amendment, having the amended accepted, but the direction of travel is clear, that we're going to get clarity and certainty, and people will understand what public health is, and there will be proper funding that can be properly funded with scrutiny, with also, and the questions between the head of the Public Accounts Committee, of course, is absolutely right. There are officers that are held to account for budgets allocated, and ministers need to propose the right things, and I urge members to support the amended proposition because it makes sense and we can move on to proper, more business.
Very much. Deputy Connie Tarbison-Tellier.
Thank you, sir. I wanted to add my voice to those who have spoken in support of this proposition as amended, particularly because the principles and the practice of public health in the community have been so well displayed in recent years. I, as most people in my age bracket will have done, have been offered an extraordinary amount of support and protection in terms of the pandemic, and I can't find it now, but I was just looking on the Opinion and Lifestyle Survey where more than 60% of people polled expressed confidence in the ability of the Public Health Department to manage any future pandemic which may arise, and of course we all hope it won't. But so it does seem to me that there is growing coordination and confidence in this department, and I think it's extremely important that the message that comes out of the States Assembly is that we have confidence in our public health professionals. Because all too often these debates, particularly about staffing and about numbers, can be picked up, I think, by people listening, by people who are working for the government, as negative, and suggesting that what they do is not valued. And so, if I may say so, sir, in the area of public health, the work being done by our officials is valued very highly. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. I'm just going to be brief. I'm not quite sure, actually, whether a vote for or against this makes any difference. Because quite simply, this is a function that's going to go ahead. It's a function that I think everybody in this room supports. So voting against it means that business will carry on as usual under the function delegated into the Cabinet Office for Public Health. By supporting the amendment, the amended version of this amendment means that they will go to SEB, which it should be anyway. So, yes, no, we're wasting time. Can we vote, please?
Any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak? Then I close the debate and call upon Deputy Howell to
Sorry,
respond.
sir,
I beg your pardon?
So I put a note in the chat to ask if I could speak, sir.
I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Yes, please.
It's a very brief one. I'd just like to propose a vote of thanks to Deputy Howell, because I firmly believe that without her intervention on a number of matters recently, we wouldn't be getting the promises of coherence that we've just had from the Health Minister and from Deputy Ozuf. So I think a lot of that is down to Deputy Howell, and I'd personally like to thank her. Thank you.
Deputy Bennett, it sometimes takes time for an indication of a desire to speak to move from the home computer to the screen of the greffier. So if you could anticipate if you're intending to speak at all in the debate, and then we won't run the risk of cutting you up.
Sir.
No, there's no need for an apology.
Unfortunately, my desire to speak only came about virtually as I typed in the request. Under normal circumstances, I'd have flagged it up earlier, but I saw the debate was coming to an end, and I just wanted to make that point because I thought it was quite important, sir. So I apologise if that's caused any confusion. Thank you.
Not at all. Does any other member wish to speak? Deputy Farnham.
No, sir, sorry, I was just going to say the 40 million IT budget should sort that out, sir.
I'll note you as having spoken then, Deputy Farnham. Does any other member wish to speak? No other member wishes to speak? Then I close the debate and call upon Deputy Howell to respond.
Thank you, sir. I would like to say that I really, really appreciate everything that the Public Health Department does, and it really keeps us all safe. And all of the staff who work there are amazing. But it was just, I felt we should be looking at the 7.43 million that they're requesting, and just to make sure that the outcomes that we're having are what we deserve. And now I say, please could I propose the amendment and call for the appel, sir. Thank you.
Well, the appel is called for. I invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on the 30th Amendment as amended. And if members have had the opportunity of returning to their seats, then I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. If members have had the opportunity of casting their vote, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been adopted. 37 votes for, 10 votes contre, no abstentions.
10, please, sir.
Those voting contre, Deputies Southern, Tadyer, Ward, Alves, Mesic, Coles, Horay, Curtis, Baltham and Kovac.
Very well. We now come on to the 12th Amendment of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, and I ask the greffier to read.
Sir, there is a proposed amendment to this amendment.
Are you prepared to take it as amended?
We're happy to take as amended. Well,
Yes.
happy is not the right word, but we'll come to that.
Very well. Do members agree that we can take the 12th Amendment as amended by the amendment lodged by the Council of Ministers? Very well. I ask the greffier to read the amendment as amended.
Paragraph L. After the words Appendix 3 to the report, insert the words except that on page 57, after Table 16, there should be inserted the following new paragraph. In accordance with the recommendations of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, as set out in SR 20 of 2022, a report published alongside the annual report and accounts will 1. Include a report on all value for money savings which were made during the duration of the previous government plan, and 2. Identify and provide full details of the monitoring process that has been undertaken on the Value for Money programme during the duration of the previous government plan.
Before I call upon President, do the Council of Ministers accept this amendment now as amended by the Council of Ministers' own amendment?
Yes, sir.
Right, that just might help truncate the debate as fewer members might feel the need to make a contribution. Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. Now I'll deliver my 3-hour speech I had planned. Scrutiny has decided to accept this amendment. I spoke to Deputy Gorst yesterday to explain that to him, but told him that I'd still have a pop at him in my speech, and I will explain why, sir. Members will know that the Value for Money programme is contentious. We've already discussed it quite a bit in relation to other amendments in this government plan so far, in particular for the extra funding for agriculture and fisheries, where we find out at the last minute that the £10 million target for value for money that they had for this year was magically able to be raised to a £13 million target with only a single sentence to substantiate how that was possible. In the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel's report last year, we contributed some commentary about the Value for Money programme and our concerns that there were not appropriate reporting standards that the government was providing along with them. And speaking frankly, we really don't know a lot about what exactly is going on, where savings are actually being targeted, where or how they're being delivered. And we have had correspondence with the Treasury Minister, which I've not been particularly satisfied with, and we've had interactions at scrutiny hearings that I've not been particularly satisfied with, where we've tried to push the Treasury Minister to give us tangible examples of value for money savings being made, and I don't feel that we were given amazingly clear answers on that. So in our report last year, we did make a recommendation that subsequent government plans should, in the document itself, provide much greater reporting on the value for money savings that have been achieved in that year of the government plan, and tell us where they're trying to target those savings in the next year of the plan, beyond a simple line in a table saying how much a department is expected to contribute to that. The amendment that the government has proposed says that instead of being provided in the government plan document itself, that commentary should be provided in the annual accounts. There is some logic behind that, in that the timing of the production of the government plan necessarily means that they won't be able to provide a full year's worth of commentary because it's published before the end of the year. So, you know, there could be 3 months potentially of success ahead that the plan wouldn't be able to tell us about, or there could be 3 months ahead of great difficulties that they wouldn't be able to tell us about, or maybe a wonderful solution would be waiting around the corner in the November that the government plan wouldn't be able in that document itself to tell us. So for the government to amend this to say that that should come in the annual accounts is probably fair enough. That will be a place where a much fuller picture of what was delivered in that year will be able to be provided. And I hope that when they do that in the next set of annual accounts, it will be as substantial as possible, and we can scrutinise it from that point. And that will, the timing of that then means our next government plan review will have had that substantially in advance to be able to look at it. So that is actually probably quite helpful. But here's where I have a pop at the Minister. His amendment, in the way it's worded, has meant that this can't be taken as separate parts, but as well as saying that this information ought to be provided in the annual accounts, they're also proposing removing part 1 of the list of things we were asking the government to provide in the government plan, which was to clearly distinguish the specific areas and projects to which value for money savings are attached. That is a forward-looking thing, which obviously can't be produced in the state's accounts. That would still have to be produced in the government plan document itself. But the way this amendment is worded, that wouldn't be possible. And so we're now not able to secure a decision from the Assembly about ensuring that the next government plan document itself, when it tells us of their targets for value for money savings in the next year, won't be required to provide a greater breakdown of the areas and projects to which they say they will achieve those value for money targets. That is extremely disappointing and means that we will continue to be in the situation where when the government says to us, we reckon we can deliver £10 million of savings next year. We're able to do nothing other than just decide whether we take their word for it and trust them. We won't be able to see exactly where they project those savings are coming from. And that itself provides a risk that we don't get to see what they're planning to do and scrutinise it and work out if it's credible and test it. And so we could end up inadvertently agreeing to that table in the government plan to impose a target for savings on a government department that might transpire to be unreasonable or unrealistic. In my book, such a target without substantiation is speculative. It is, I think, based on the I reckon we can do this rather than I can prove we can do this and here's the evidence and here's the specific projects that we can take this from. The Fiscal Policy Panel now twice has had to say to the government, you shouldn't be including speculative savings in the government plan because it means if you don't deliver them, because you've still set those budget lines for each government department, if you get halfway or 2/3 of the way through the year and it turns out your expectations were wrong and you can't deliver those savings, that pressure is going to move elsewhere. And we won't have any guarantees that where that pressure moves on to won't be somewhere where it less resembles savings and more resembles cuts, or forces departments to make the kinds of decisions on prioritisation that actually the Assembly wouldn't have agreed to if we'd have known that's where it was going to go all along. So, Sir, we find ourselves accepting their amendment and asking the Assembly to vote for the amendment as amended, knowing that when we get the annual accounts, we will get a better picture of what value for money savings were made in the year before, which we're pleased with, and that will be useful information and it will be laid out to us better than it would be if it were in the government plan as we had suggested. But we still don't find ourselves in a position where in the next government plan they'll be required to provide us a much greater level of detail in their forward-looking projections for value for money savings. And so I think our scrutiny panel today will have to settle for what's on the table, but early next year may have to consider how we further pursue that part of our previous recommendation to the government to provide greater reporting on what they're projecting before the moment, so that when it comes to the next government plan, the Assembly's in a better position to make an informed judgment on that one way or another. So it's not completely ideal, but we do get something out of this in the way of transparency and accountability and the ability for scrutiny to do its job. And so I think we can settle for that for now and then return to this issue, to the outstanding parts of this issue as soon as possible.
Thank you very much. Is it seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? No member wishes to speak on the amendment? Then I close the debate. Those in favour of adopting the amendment kindly show. Those against? The amendment is adopted. The next matter to be dealt with is the 10th Amendment proposed by Deputy Andrews, and I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
Paragraph L. After the words as set out in Appendix 3 of the report, insert the words except that on page 57, after the section entitled Thematic Reviews and Best Value Reviews, should be inserted a new section as follows. Payroll expenditure savings. During 2024, the government will implement a scheme to reduce payroll expenditure by 40 million in non-frontline roles, such savings to be transferred to the Stabilisation Fund and Strategic Reserve Fund. Whilst it is not anticipated that the full 40 million savings will be realised during 2024, it is expected that the process to effect the reduction in staffing will be underway, and this will be reported in the Government Plan 2025 to 2027.
Deputy.
Thank you very much, sir. Well, the reason, sir, why I have decided to lodge this amendment is due to the Council of Ministers who've really been prioritising growth bids in this government plan. And we've seen 48 million growth bids be proposed, and we've not seen any transfers be made to the Stabilisation Fund. Now, the Stabilisation Fund once had a value of about 50 million. Now it's got a value of about £600,000. And I just think it's very disappointing. What we have seen once again is more government spending, and there hasn't been priorities in the right places. And it's a real concern because even the Fiscal Policy Panel mentioned in their recent report about the government ought to be making transfers to the reserves, and instead what we do see, as Deputy Mezek just highlighted before, is speculative savings. So at the end of the next calendar year, the government is going to rely upon, if additional income is seen or if any underspends are made, then such transfers will be made to the reserves, sir. And I think that is unfortunate because really what we should be seeing is explicit detail in terms of how those savings will be made and how those transfers will be secured, sir. And I know, of course, we've got 12 ministers in the Council of Ministers, and there's some ministers who I think are on the same page as I, and they would have wanted those transfers to be made in this government plan, and unfortunately that has not happened, sir. But I also want to get on to another thing, sir. Looking at the strategic reserve, as a percentage of gross value added, it's about 17%, and ideally, as the Fiscal Policy Panel have highlighted, it should be somewhere between 30 to 60%. So we are way off where we need to be, and we need to be increasing the value of a strategic reserve. And what that means is, sir, we've got to find funds to do that. Now, some people are going to be, of course, opposed to additional taxes. And the other mechanism that you have is by making reductions within public sector spend and making transfers that way. And that's another alternative that some members may be in support of, sir. But it's obviously very clear, sir, ever since I was elected, I said I want to address the structure and organisation of the government because I truly do believe that ministers should see civil servants be accountable to them. But I think the more convoluted the structure where you're seeing the size of the government expand, then you're questioning the accountability and also to a degree the transparency that we see as well. And I think accountability and transparency has often been mentioned and it's just words, and I don't think we've actually seen it be conspicuous enough in my view, sir. Now, turning to headcount, sir, I've always been asking questions ever since I was elected, and I have to say, sir, there are a few things that are quite alarming now, sir, because when I asked one written question about headcount in different departments, the Cabinet Office now has 640 persons employed, and that was as of the 30th of June 2023. Now, there is a breakdown when we look at the department itself. So within the Chief Operating Office, there is about 374 personnel. Looking at the Strategic Policy Planning and Performance, there's about 194 personnel. And looking at the Office of the Chief Executive, we see 72 people employed, sir. Now, that for me is quite alarming because I've also been asking other questions and looking at, say, previous years to look at how many people have been employed within the Office of the Chief Executive, the Chief Operating Office, and the Strategic Office Planning and Performance before the emergence of a Cabinet Office. And the figures that I have here from 2018, there was 238 people employed in all of those areas as an aggregate number. And we then see an increase up to 640, so that's a 402. The number of employees has increased by 402 across a fairly short time period. And you can question, maybe why so many people have been upset with the way how the politicians such as us have been managing public finances when you see no control in headcount growth. And also you have to then question, of course, the accountability between civil servants and ministers, sir. Now, looking at even the salary bands across the public sector, it's quite disconcerting when we look at some of the figures here, sir, because it seems to me that we're just employing too many people and in certain instances in the wrong areas, as we see with the Cabinet Office. That's not really about providing a frontline service for the public. So those on a wage between, say, £60,000 and 79,000 up to nearly 80,000 has increased by 425 employees between the period of 2018 and 2022. Now, when we're looking at those employed between who receive a salary between 80,000 and 99,000, again across the period, 79 more employees have been employed, and with those on salaries above £100,000, 43 persons have been employed as well. So we just need to look at the growth bids that have been proposed in the government plan. I think all we're going to be seeing is additional public servants, and also that's going to be depriving the private sector of employing people. And it's been mentioned by private sector leaders such as the IOD, who've been complaining, and quite rightly so, because we've already got a tight labour market, and the public sector is expanding, and really what the government should be doing is looking at how we can try and improve public administration. And I'm a firm believer in improving public administration, and that was something that Anthony Giddens predicated, and he was really one of the founders of the new Labour movement. Because at this moment in time, I think it's a shame really that the public are just seeing the expansion of the public sector, and we're seeing growth in the wrong places as well. Now, I think if we were seeing an improvement in public administration, then people perhaps would say, well, no, it's well justified. But I really don't see the justification. I know other members do feel the same way as I privately, but I think in terms of the way how they'd be voting here, then they're going to be voting a bit different, because they don't want to stand up and they don't want to be different. They don't want to be, kind of considered to be similar, say, to Deputy Higgins, who was a bit of a character, and I'm probably just like him now. But I'll...
Well, sir, it's not really
sorry,
appropriate to name people who are not members of the Assembly within the Assembly, because they have no right to reply or answer.
He was well outspoken, sir. I'll say that, a bit like me. So that's in a positive way I'm saying it, sir. But sir, I move a proposition.
Well, is the proposition seconded? If the proposition is not seconded, is the proposition seconded? If the proposition is not seconded, it's deemed withdrawn. The proposition is withdrawn. Very well. We move now to the eighth amendment, which is brought by our Deputy Ward, and I ask the Secretary to read that amendment.
Paragraph L. After the words Appendix 3 to the report, insert the words, except that on page 91, after the words previously agreed increases in fuel duty, should be inserted the words 1,500,000 of the funding allocated from the Climate Emergency Fund to the 2022-2025 carbon neutral roadmap budget will be moved from the TR1 policy subsidising electric vehicles and e-bikes to finance an extension to the Avanci 18 bus scheme to all Jersey residents aged 21 and under.
Deputy.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to keep this as short as possible. See if I can win the record. This amendment extends the age of the extremely popular and successful under 18 bus pass to 21 years of age. Please note this has been extended to all full-time students previously, which was accepted by the government last time. I was hoping they'd accept this one. So to make real change in transport habits, we must start early, and the current provision is doing just that. Extending the age, we continue the incentive to young people as they start to travel regularly to work and begin their working lives. This is a clear message from this Assembly to continue this cultural change in the means of travel from the private car to public transport. It targets a reduction in car use, which is good for our environment, good for others who may necessitate a private car travel, and good for the residents of St Helier. Sir, I invite members to add to the debate in as brief a way as I have, and I lodged the amendment. Thank you, sir.
Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? If no member wishes, Deputy Tadier.
Thanks, sir. And I think that was a great speech. Apart from the last part, which said it's great for the residents of St Helier, which it no doubt is, but it's also great for the young people throughout all of the island. And I'm particularly thinking of the wonderful skate park that we've got in St Brellards at the Kennebec, which, despite some of the concerns perhaps of some of the residents, is seeming to work very well, and it's popular with young people, and not just young people, in fact, older skaters and parents who accompany younger people to that skate park throughout the island. And one of the great things that we've seen is that young people who are in perhaps full-time education or under 18 can go from St Martin, they can change at St Helier, and then they can get to Llanelli and do some skating and then go back to town. It may seem like a slightly long journey, but for those who don't want to be reliant on their parents, and there will be people doing that from all over the island. You know, Trinity, we don't need to name all the parishes, do we? I'm sure I could. I think this scheme, again, we talked about a knife edge earlier, about when you get to 18, and what if you're not in full-time education, but you may not also be in full-time work? You may be doing voluntary work, you may be doing informal study. I think this is a logical progression of a scheme that some, I think, were sceptical about initially, but we've seen that the scheme does work very well. So extending it to young people wherever they live in the island for that benefit. And the last thing to say is it's also very popular with parents and grandparents, because it means that those parents and grandparents don't always have to be on call to be the taxi of mum and dad. So I commend Deputy Ward for bringing this, and I hope this is one of those positive things that we can all get behind as an assembly.
Deputy Tom Binet.
Thank you, sir. I certainly wasn't intending to speak this early, but I didn't want to miss the chance of saying something, and I've certainly been caught off balance by the brevity of Deputy Ward's introductory speech. I thought I'd be listening for a lot longer, I'm under no illusion about how difficult it's going to be to persuade members not to vote for this amendment, but I hope they don't vote for it. And the reason is simply because free bus travel is so seductive. But I would urge members to look beyond that seduction and take a look at sort of some of the facts that underlie a decent bus service. And so I may be guilty of a false assumption, but everything I hear from Deputy Ward when he stands up to talk about buses indicates to me that he's really quite keen on seeing a very heavily subsidised bus service, if not a free one. And we'll notice this because there's another attempt to have free services in Amendment 9, which is yet to be debated. However, sir, the evidence within the transport industry suggests that heavily subsidised bus services are not always the best or most practical or economical way to resolve transport problems or to encourage bus usership in an economical way. And it might be helpful if I identify some of the areas where I agree with Deputy Ward. And I certainly think we probably both agree on we want to increase bus usage, reduce congestion, promote healthy lifestyles and active travel, and improve the environment. And I don't think we'd be disagreeing on those parts. But I think where we do differ, sir, is on whether we should continue to chip away at what is already a well-subsidised service, or maintain a level of customer contribution that's sufficient to provide an incentive for the bus operator to continue to improve the services whilst ensuring that they remain cost effective, sir. I'm very much of the opinion that the latter is by far the best option for us here in Jersey, and I've little doubt that the service driven by commercial incentive produces a generally better result. And I think where cost is a barrier for particular groups in society, I think that issue should be dealt with through social policy rather than transport policy. As is the case in many progressive societies, sir. In order to substantiate that, our head of transport, who's a very experienced individual, has provided some information, and in one of those instances of information, he's referred me to the International Journal of Transportation, and within that there's an article entitled Free Fares Policy, and it's I don't think I'd recommend it to anybody if they're at a loose end, but there are a number of facts in there. And within that, they state the following. Free public transport as a political goal in its own right is, of course, legitimate. But when free fare schemes are advocated and justified as a means to meet the environmental, social, or efficiency goals, the evidence presented here suggests that the arguments are largely misguided. With that in mind, sir, rather than the continuous injection of public subsidy to increase bus usage, the more productive way, I think, is to significantly improve the quality of the service. Evidence also suggests that the most important factors are things such as geographical coverage, the frequency and the timing of the bus departures, and the distance and quality of walking routes to and from the bus stops, and the waiting environment at the bus stops themselves, sir. Additional elements are the perceived or actual availability of seating on the buses, along with individualised information and special offers to encourage behavioural change and changes in routine. Perhaps I think the most compelling of these, according to the evidence, is increased frequency. And I think further improvements in this area would certainly be of greater benefit than subsidised fares. And it's also seemingly a fact that free travel will do little to get people out of their cars, because this is a bigger and more serious issue if we're going to reduce congestion and exhaust emissions. By way of example, if you're a car owner and you're on a route where you have to wait for up to an hour at each end of the bus journey, the chances are that you take your car, and even if you had a free bus pass. And I've got a free bus pass there for my sins, and I'm afraid I would take the car because I can't afford the waiting time. And to me, it's this sort of situation that needs to be addressed if we're going to continue with our transport initiatives, and that's what our policy seeks to do. And the aim there is to build on the success of the current bus service model, and it's a bus model that's been well recognised in the UK for the large increase in passengers that it's achieved over the last few years. And I think a failure to maintain this approach would risk destroying the commercial principles that have made the current bus operating contract as successful as it is. And not only that, but it's likely to adversely affect the service quality that's taken many years to achieve. And it would bring with it a lot of extra cost, I think. And there's no sign as to where the money is going to come from in the longer term, sir. And that's a very crucial point. I think we need to be mindful of the fact that a commercial operator can respond to demand more quickly and can invest in new services. And by way of an example, a new electric bus with all of the paraphernalia that's required with it is about £250,000. And a commercial operator can also take financial risk and doesn't have to wait to bid for money through long-winded government plan processes. And it's really in large part because of this advantage that we already have 2 electric buses operating in town, sir. I think it goes without saying that if money were no object, we'd have a fleet of buses scouring the island and running as frequently as took our fancy, sir. However, as we've heard a fair amount in recent days, we're already in danger of living well beyond our means. We're a low-tax island, and we have to accept that there are limits to what we can achieve in terms of providing highly subsidised services. And that might sound like a statement of the obvious, but when I listen to certain members, I don't think that's always fully appreciated. I'd just like to make one additional point, sir, and it's rather counterintuitive. The evidence that's been provided also suggests that free buses are more likely to bring about a reduction in cycling and walking rather than a reduction in traffic. It's not what you'd expect, but that's what the evidence suggests. This is due to what in the transport world is actually referred to as cross-mode elasticity. That's not my term, sir. That's what the evidence says. For example, free transport in Tallinn and in Estonia resulted in reduced cycling and walking, and the same occurred in an area of Belgium where they tried that as well. And indeed, in the latter, the free bus service eventually became such a financial burden that they had to reintroduce charging for the service. Excuse me. So in practice, I think that's what we know instinctively. Car drivers don't give up the comfort of their cars very readily, but cyclists or walkers may well be willing to change their habits and jump on a bus if it's going their way, particularly if the weather's inclement, but most especially if they've been given a free bus pass. So we're currently renegotiating the bus contract, and that may well result in a further upgrade to our bus fleet, making it more efficient and environmentally friendly. I think the danger here is if we go along with this amendment, it's going to further erode the commercial advantages that we currently enjoy and simply be another step towards casting the entire cost of the bus service onto the general taxpayer. So I'm trusting that there are many members that actually fully get this, and they know that we can't go on doing that. So on that note, I seriously urge members to reject this otherwise very seductive amendment, sir. Thank you.
Very much. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment, the Connétable St Martin?
Thank you, sir. Other jurisdictions really support subsidised transport, and these places are an absolute joy to visit because the reliance on the car is taken out of the equation. My son took his first Masters in Amsterdam. My daughter is living and studying in Montreal, and transport is subsidised and it's used and it's really highly appreciated. I don't agree with the previous speaker. I would say that the more use on reliance on public transport, the less cars there will be on the road, and cycling and walking would rather, somebody like me who doesn't like too many cars on the road to cycle. I mean, I would actually think about taking my electric bike further than St Martin's. But I do think that for students and young people up to 21, I do travel quite a lot. I've been to these places. My son, as I said, in Amsterdam, my daughter in Montreal, and I am going to support this. And I would say to the previous speaker, baby steps. We can't say that you can't use a bus because it's not convenient at that time. I think the more we progress with public transport, the better it'll be for the island, and and we shouldn't rely so heavily on our cars. So I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Connétable St Helier.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to start off by saying that I completely agree with Deputy Ward that funding should be taken from the electric vehicle subsidy vote and applied to sustainable transport initiatives. And I've said this more than once, and I'm hopeful that now that I'm a member of the Council of Ministers, I'll be able to persuade those who hold the electric vehicle budget that it simply isn't right to give money to wealthy people to buy expensive cars when there are so many other sustainable transport initiatives that have been neglected by the states over the past few decades. I don't agree with the previous speaker, and it's an interesting comment because Deputy Binet, the Minister, has already mentioned that if he had extra money to spend on buses, he'd spend it on improving the frequency of routes, particularly the routes to the countryside, to the rural parishes. If you want to use a bus to travel to St Martin, for example, or St Juan, your options are very limited. There certainly aren't any late buses, so if you want to enjoy the vibrant offerings of the capital, St Helier, you had better fork out for a taxi and probably book it in advance if you want to get home after a night out. And I think that there is a good argument that later buses and other useful information like real-time information at bus stops, which is still lacking in most parts of the island, would be a good way to spend some of this extra money if we're going to spend it on buses. What this goes back to, of course, is we still don't have a bus strategy, despite years and years of asking for one. Rather than belabouring the infrastructure minister for the absence of a bus strategy, or indeed a cycling strategy, or indeed a walking strategy, or indeed a parking one, I have offered the Chief Minister, when I agreed to join the Council of Ministers, that I will get these strategies brought forward, because we really need them. And I'd rather not have another debate next year on the next tranche of bus subsidy. I'd rather have a joined-up discussion about how, in the round, we can improve our buses in this island that will help everyone. And I'm confident that we can do that, even though, as I say, the delay has been quite extraordinary. But if we are to spend money in a more holistic way on buses, and if we are to make cycling safer, for the many people who would like to cycle but find it simply too dangerous, if we are to make walking more convenient, then we're going to have some money to spend on sustainable transport. And the problem about whittling away the available money to spend on sustainable transport is that the pot is only so big. Now, I'm hopeful that it'll be bigger than before, because, as I say, I hope we won't spend it all on motorists buying expensive cars. But even if we do that, just the cost of putting in the kind of pedestrian crossing facilities we need on the busier roads is enormous. And that could easily use up all of the funding. And of course, there has to be a discussion about priorities, but the priorities that we've all signed up to in successive debates, because we're very good at debating transport in general terms, we've all signed up to putting the most priority on the disabled. And the next priority is the person who is walking. And after that is the person on their bicycle. So to put all the funding, or a large tranche of the funding available, into bus travel is simply to get our priorities wrong. And it's to leave the needs of disabled transport users, the needs of walkers who cannot get conveniently and comfortably across and along our busy roads, particularly the needs of those who would like to cycle more but find it too scary. It's to neglect them at the expense of people on the buses. So much as I admire the work that Deputy Ward has done to promote bus travel amongst the young, I think there are a lot of young people who would actually, if it was possible to do so, rather get on their bike, and they would welcome the kind of facilities that I think we should be spending, and we should be spending under the overall aegis of a transport strategy for Jersey. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Conor
Sir, may I just ask for a point of clarification, please?
Would you give way for a point of clarification, Conor?
From my fellow minister, yes, sir, I will.
Thank you, sir. It was just the Assistant Chief Minister said there was no walking strategy, etc., etc. But can he clarify whether, in his understanding, they do form part of the framework for a sustainable transport system, part of the sustainable transport policy under the active travel elements of that? Is he able to clarify?
Well, thank you. It's a difficult question because, of course, I'm now a member of the government, and I certainly feel, to a large extent, bound by collective responsibility, though I know that not all ministers feel that way. So I've been a critic of the island's transport strategies for years, and I believe that simply bringing out one document every year or so with lots of fine words and talk about quick start plans and such like, it isn't really worth much more than the paper it's written on. I don't find walking or cycling, certainly around town, any easier for the production of the latest document. We need detailed, practical help for people who want to walk and cycle and use disabled transport around our island. We don't need any more fine-looking documents. I wouldn't have said any of that, sir, if my fellow minister hadn't asked for a point of clarification.
Very well clarified, sir.
Deputy Hegra.
Thank you, sir. I do have a bus pass. I know you might not think I'm old enough, but I do. And I do sporadically use it. And the reason I don't use it all the time is probably because of the reasons highlighted by the infrastructure minister, in that where I live, the buses aren't as frequent as I would like. Where I have to stand on the side of the road isn't the best. However, I will support this particular proposition in relation to extending the bus scheme from 18 to 21. Because I do feel that this might be a good opportunity to encourage, or continue to encourage, those that haven't got the dependency so much on cars, that opportunity. I also, like others, am not keen on the idea that we give subsidised electric cars and bikes, because they're very expensive, and mostly people who can afford to buy them will be able to afford to buy them without the subsidy on them. And of course, as has already been mentioned on a number of occasions, we don't actually know what happens to them, whether people use them or whether actually they keep them on the island or not. Also, there is no cycle routes really from the east of the island, which is where I live. And so in the past, I've also tried to cycle. But quite frankly, if you cycle between Five Oaks and St Martin's Church, on your head be it, because I've actually seen people cycling on the pavements rather than cycle on the road, because it is quite congested and the lighting is pretty poor. So I will support in relation to the First Amendment. I haven't decided about the second, so we'll move forward on that. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? Conor Trinity.
Thank you, sir. I would like to support this proposition, but I feel if I do, I'm going to incur the wrath of a number of parents in my parish who write to me and my fellow district deputies complaining that their youth can get to town on the bus, But if they want to stay there past 6 o'clock in the evening, they can't get home. We are saddled with a bus service which was designed to service the island needs 20 or 30 years ago, and it really needs a whole coat of looking at and not just tinkling with it. So I'm afraid, in respect of my parishioners who, I say, have youngsters who would like to use the bus and can't because there isn't a bus to use, I'm afraid I won't actually be supporting this proposition. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Farnham.
I was just thinking in an attempt to perhaps persuade the Constable of Trinity otherwise, which is never easy, I must say, and that's a compliment, that surely by increasing demand of further service, that will be a catalyst for an improved service. The more people we get onto the buses, the more chance we've got of getting a better service. I hope that helps, sir. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak? Then I close the debate and call upon Deputy.
Thank you, sir.
I'm sorry, Deputy. Deputy Reniff in the chat had indicated a desire to speak.
Thank you, sir. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you, Deputy.
Good. I wanted to pick up a line of reasoning that's been raised by a few people, but to do with EVs and e-bikes. But before that, I would like to emphasise the points that Deputy Binet made about the arguments to reject this amendment on the grounds of its impact on the bus service and the untargeted spending that it involves. The evidence suggests that many of the users of free travel, regardless of what we might believe anecdotally, the users of free travel will replace short active travel journeys that already occur. And I think that's a very, very important point to make. The current bus service and the way we fund it is a success. And we should be very wary of doing the damage to this that Deputy Binet pointed out that will happen. And I think it's been fairly clear that Deputy Rob Ward, who has a very clear commitment to free bus travel and regards free bus travel for the whole island as his eventual goal, that this is another step in that direction, and that's fair enough. I think it's the wrong direction for reasons I'll come on to in a moment. So the element of this I want to talk about in particular is the other aspect of this amendment, which is to take money from the EV and e-bike incentives. And I wanted to update members on these subsidies to explain why I don't think we should take the money from them for this purpose. But I do also want to signal a shift in direction in spending of the Climate Emergency Fund money over the next year or two. But if I could, first of all, deal with the e-bike and EV incentive as they are currently operating. They were introduced because not enough people supposedly these people who are well off and so on who we would like to buy EVs and e-bikes, not enough people were buying them. And that was recognised in the carbon neutral roadmap. And that was why these policies were voted for. It was recognised that a significant proportion of the island's greenhouse gas emissions come from fossil fuel private vehicle use. And people will continue to make private vehicle journeys, and therefore reducing emissions from this sector is a crucial part of our emission reduction pathway. And I would say to those people who think that buses are the answer to this, it isn't. There is plenty of evidence of places where buses have been made entirely free. I know particularly about Luxembourg. Luxembourg, the bus network is entirely free throughout the entire territory, but they still have traffic jams. I recently asked the ambassador about this, and he said, yeah, people are just wedded to their cars. So we need to decarbonise private vehicle use. That is a necessity if we are to meet our carbon reduction targets. And it may be that we kind of struggle with that we would prefer to reduce car use even further. I would like to reduce car use further, but there will still be car use, and we will still need to shift to electric vehicles. And we, at the moment, find that price is a barrier to that. And this was recognised in the inclusion of policy TR1 in the carbon neutral roadmap, which was publicly consulted on and then agreed by the States Assembly in 2022 and voted for by many members in the Assembly, including the Constable of St Helier and others. Although I can say to the Constable that I have some positive things to say about his own speech later in my speech. So the TR1 policy included, as I say, adopted by the Assembly, included money for 1,200 electric vehicle incentives and 1,000 electric charger incentives. And that was also partly to recognise the fact that policy TR5 in the carbon neutral roadmap includes a commitment to ban the importation of petrol and diesel vehicles from 2030. So the incentive was part of the market preparation for the introduction of that legislation and that move. And as everybody knows, it's funded through the Climate Emergency Fund, revenue from which comes in part from fuel duty and vehicle emissions duty hypothecated into the fund to directly support decarbonisation. And the carbon neutral roadmap agreed that policy TR1 would have £4.3 million with an additional £521,000 for the EV charger incentive. So we finally launched those incentives, the EV incentive rather, at the end of August, up to £3,500 offered to new and second-hand electrical vehicles registered for the first time in Jersey, up to a maximum vehicle value of £40,000. And up to the end of November, I can say that 228 EV purchase incentives have been issued and 25 charger incentives, and the total direct cost has been around just under £800,000. It's important, I think, to note that of those 228 EV purchase incentives, 83% have been for second-hand vehicles with an average price of around £25,000. That's second-hand vehicles that get their first registration in the island. It doesn't apply to vehicles that are already in the island on the second-hand market. And there's been a significant increase in electrical vehicle registrations observed since the start of the incentive. We can already tell that. For example, in 2022, there were a total of 449 additional EVs coming into the island. To the end of October, there were already 555, and at the rate of acceleration we've seen with the EV incentive scheme, it could get close to 1,000 by the end of 2024. Looking at e-bikes, I wanted to address some of the arguments that people use against the e-bike incentive. It's really important to note that people getting e-bikes are often replacing car journeys. And this is exactly what we would want. We want to encourage active travel. E-bikes are a more active form of travel, obviously, than sitting in a car. We haven't done the full analysis on people who have taken up the e-bike incentive in Jersey yet. But if we look at Guernsey, which they ran an e-bike incentive scheme in 2017, 2018. And I have these figures from my opposite number in Guernsey. They had a total of 387 e-bikes sold under their scheme. And they surveyed those people. And on average, they found that each e-bike had been ridden for 683 miles over a year. And if that was applied to all of the e-bikes sold, it would give us a total of 265,000 miles a year. And crucially, data from the Guernsey survey showed that 57% of those e-bike journeys mainly replaced car journeys, while 63% of e-bike owners reported that their e-bike had replaced motor vehicles as their primary mode of transport. Now, as I say, we've yet to do our own research, but there is little reason to suppose that Jersey's e-bike incentive will have operated in a radically different way to that. However, I would say that we recognise we need to invest substantially in sustainable transport. And the aim, of course, as put forward in sustainable transport, in the sustainable transport policy, and was to have separate budgets for this. And indeed, bids have been made through the government plan process to have funding for sustainable transport measures. But we have not been able to achieve this. So what I would say is that in recognition of this, we need to reprioritise funding through the Climate Emergency Fund in recognition of the fact that the total picture that we had imagined would be in place, in other words, that we would have sustainable transport policy funded through the government plan, and the Climate Emergency Fund to fund those specific measures that members voted for in the carbon neutral roadmap. We have to recognise that we have not been able to achieve the funding through the government plan for sustainable transport. And therefore, we need to reprofile the spending that we do through the Climate Emergency Fund and direct it much more towards sustainable transport. So that is the commitment that I make. And I and Deputy Jern are both working on this already. This has already been sort of acknowledged behind the scenes, if you like. And that is work that we have asked officers to start doing, to work out how we can do that reprioritisation and so on. We will probably need to come back to the Assembly, since it does involve potentially changing policies that were within the carbon neutral roadmap. There may be some flexibility. We haven't yet, as I say, done the work to work out exactly how we will achieve that.
Deputy, if I could interrupt you just for a moment, I'm afraid, could you indicate how much longer you think you may have to speak on this topic? The reason I say so is that, firstly, we're in the period that standing orders require that I raise the question of the adjournment, and secondly, we already have fixed the photograph of the chamber to take place at 12:45 with all the members in it for the website. So if it is a matter that you'll be finished very quickly, then I think you could continue, but if you have a good few minutes more, you may need to continue after the adjournment.
Sorry, sir, I'm not able to see the clock here, so...
no, that's quite all right. You're well within your time. It's just...
If members can bear with me for a minute, then I will finish.
Very well. Please continue.
So what I would say, so I agree with the Constable of St Helier. We do need to do that shift. We're already planning to do it, and now he's in the ministerial team. He will be involved in doing that. But what I would say in terms of this amendment in front of us, we already subsidise public transport to the tune of millions of pounds. We have to maintain within the spending profiles that we have, the priority being to use the Climate Emergency Fund on the highest priority of the sustainable transport hierarchy, which is, as the Constable of St Helier pointed out, active travel. And therefore, I think it would be wrong to take money from this to weaken the economic model of the bus service and take it away from something that is a higher priority for our spending. And on that basis, I do urge members to reject this amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy.
Sir, before I propose the adjournment, may I ask the Assembly to reconsider its decision of this morning, given the excellent progress that we have made this morning, and agree to rise this evening at 6 o'clock as previously agreed and return tomorrow?
Yes, you make that proposition, do you, Chief Minister? So the Chief Minister, as any member can deal with order. That's been proposed. Is that seconded to finish at 6 o'clock? Does any member wish to speak on that?
So I think the only problem is we may make such good progress that we don't need to come back tomorrow, and we might wish to sit for an extra 2 hours so that we don't come back tomorrow. So I don't know at what point we'll know that.
Well, members can, of course, adopt the proposition, and the proposition can always be revisited, or members can reject the proposition, and the timing can always be revisited, as we know, close to the time. It's just a question of which way members wish to go. It's not one of those things that we don't allow a debate in the preceding 3 months. Any other member wish to speak on that proposition? The proposition is we now adjourn at 6 this evening, come back tomorrow morning. If no other member wishes to speak, then those in favour of adopting the position kindly show. Those against? It's entirely unclear to me which has it. Therefore, we'll call for the appel. The vote is on. A vote pour means that we, at this point, have decided to adjourn at 6 o'clock and return tomorrow morning. A vote contre is to the effect that we will continue until 8 o'clock this evening, or have finished, whichever is the sooner. Given the conversation within, I hesitate to do so because the proposition has been duly made and duly seconded. But I wonder if this vote might be taken immediately after the luncheon adjournment and people can then discuss over the lunch hour what they think the right thing to do might be. Would you be amenable to that, Chief Minister?
And I'd be pleased to make a summing up speech if required.
No, right.
Sir, can I advise the Assembly I'll be joining on Teams this afternoon due to the school closures?
Thank you very much indeed, Deputy. Well, in which case that seems to have general agreement. We will treat this then as adjourned and the vote to be taken immediately after, and the Chief Minister will be in a position to sum up if she wishes, or any member to speak in that matter if the discussions over the lunch hour give a reason to do so, and then the vote can be taken then as to what we do for the rest of the afternoon. Very well. Deputy Lehegra?
Can I remind members that we did agree that we'd have a shortened lunch hour today, so we should be back
Indeed.
at 2 o'clock, sir.
Well, indeed, I'm going to ask members to remain in the Assembly now. I won't retire myself because we have a photograph to be taken, and then thereafter we'll adjourn, but we will resume at 2 o'clock. Griff, here, where are we for the photograph? There's a gentleman now.